Hello, Loony Marauder. I see you. Well, it seems like some people are trickling in. It's good. I appreciate it. This is just my loading screen for now, you could say, while I finish getting some things together. Should be just about ready. Hope you don't mind the ambiance. Well, no sense in waiting around. Let's get started. Good evening. Hello. Welcome to Mars on Monday. Today, we're going to be doing something a little different. Experimenting. Trying something new. That is the nature of man, I think. To evolve, to adapt, to change. And today, I would like for you to join me in a reading selections from, well, this very text. Cheers to you, one and all. My tea today is Earl Grey. Of course, it's delightful. I only drink this on rainy days, and there have been sun showers. Today's text: The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, from the public domain, so I don't think there's going to be any copyright problems. This text, specifically, is dated 1987. It's older than me. We have a table of contents, that's nice. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 stories. A full dozen. Oh, and Baker's dozen makes the afterword. We also have a listing of illustrations. I suppose when I arrive at an illustration, I could show it to you. The benefit of this video audiobook, I suppose. Hello, friend Frost. Welcome. Hey, no joke, I'd love to do audiobooks. I listen to audiobooks all the time. It's great. Allow me to sample my beverage, and then we'll get started. Delightful. No sweetener, by the way. I've begun taking my tea straight. Just bitter. Bracing. Wonderful. Shall we be off on an adventure in London or wherever? All right, full disclosure. I've never read Sherlock Holmes before, so I'm pretty excited. This is my blind playthrough. Any percent Sherlock Holmes. I've never read. I've never watched the films or the TV series, anything like that. So this, what you're witnessing here with me, is my first taste of Sherlock Holmes. Except I did watch like a BBC film for Blue Carbuncle last year. But that story is also in here, so that'll be cool. Okay, thanks for joining me for this. It'll be fun. I haven't read any of these. A Scandal in Bohemia. Which I think is the first Sherlock Holmes short story. To Sherlock Holmes, she is always the woman. I have seldom heard him mention her under any other name. In his eyes, she eclipses and predominates the whole of her sex. It was not that he felt any emotion akin to love for Irene Adler. All emotions, and that one particularly, were abhorrent to his cold, precise, but admirably balanced mind. He was, I take it, the most perfect reasoning and observing machine that the world has seen. But as a lover, he would have placed himself in a false position. He never spoke of the softer passions, save with a jibe and a sneer. They were admirable things for the observer, excellent for drawing the veil from men's motives and actions, but for the trained reasoner to admit such intrusions into his own delicate and finely adjusted temperament was to introduce a distracting factor which might throw a doubt upon all his mental results. Grit in a sensitive instrument, or a crack in one of his own high-power lenses, would not be more disturbing than a strong emotion in a nature such as his. And yet, there was but one woman to him, and that woman was the late Irene Adler, of dubious and questionable memory. I had seen little of Holmes lately. My marriage had drifted us away from each other, my own complete happiness, and the home-centered interest which rise up around the man who first finds himself master of his own establishment, were sufficient to absorb all my attention, while Holmes, who loathed every form of society with his whole Bohemian soul, remained in our lodgings in Baker Street, buried among his old books and alternating from week to week between cocaine and ambition. The drowsiness of the drug and the fierce energy of his own keen nature. He was still, as ever, deeply attracted by the study of crime, and occupied his immense faculties and extraordinary powers of observation in following out those clues, and clearing up those mysteries which had been abandoned as hopeless by the official police. From time to time, I heard some vague account of his doings, of his summons to Odessa in the case of the Trepoff murder, of his clearing up of the singular tragedy of the Atkinson brothers at Trincomalee, and finally of the mission which he had accomplished so delicately and successfully for the reigning family of Holland. Beyond these signs of his activity, however, which I merely shared with all the readers of the daily press, I knew little of my former friend and companion. Kim, hi! Thanks for joining us. We just got started. Thanks for the raid. Thanks for bringing people over. Hello. We're reading A Scandal in Bohemia, the first Sherlock Holmes short story. We're just barely in. Still getting exposition. Thank you for the excitement and positivity there, Frost. One night, it was on the 20th of March, 1888. I was returning from a journey to a patient, for I had now returned to civil practice, when my way led me through Baker Street. As I passed the well-remembered door which must always be associated in my mind with my wooing and with the dark incidents of the study in scarlet, I was seized with a keen desire to see Holmes again, and to know how he was employing his extraordinary powers. His rooms were brilliantly lit, and even as I looked up, I saw his tall, spare figure pass twice in a dark silhouette against the blind. He was pacing the room swiftly, eagerly, with his head sunk upon his chest, and his hands clasped behind him. To me, who knew his every mood and habit, his attitude and manner told their own story. He was at work again. He had risen out of his drug-created dreams and was hot upon the scent of some new problem. I rang the bell and was shown up to the chamber which had formerly been in part my own. His manner was not effusive. It seldom was, but he was glad, I think, to see me. With hardly a word spoken, but with a kindly eye, he waved me to an armchair, threw across his case of cigars, and indicated a spirit case and a gasogene in the corner. Then he stood before the fire and looked me over in his singular, introspective fashion. "Wedlock suits you," he remarked. "I think, Watson, that you have put on 7.5 pounds since I saw you." "7?" I answered. "Indeed. I should have thought a little more, just a trifle more, I fancy, Watson. And in practice again, I observe. You did not tell me that you intended to go into harness. Well, then how do you know?" "I see it, I deduce it. How do I know that you have been getting yourself very wet lately, and that you have a most clumsy and careless servant girl?" "My dear Holmes," said I, "this is too much. You would certainly have been burned had you lived a few centuries ago. It is true that I had a country walk on Thursday, and came home in a dreadful mess, but as I have changed my clothes, I can't imagine how you deduce it. As to Mary Jane, she is incorrigible, and my wife has given her notice. But there, again, I fail to see how you work it out." He chuckled to himself and rubbed his long, nervous hands together. "It is simplicity itself," said he. "My eyes tell me that on the inside of your left shoe, just where the firelight strikes it, the leather is scored by 6 almost parallel cuts. Now, obviously, they have been caused by someone who has very carelessly scraped round the edges of the sole in order to remove crusted mud from it. Hence, you see my double deduction that you had been out in vile weather, and that you had a particularly malignant boot-slitting specimen of the London slavey. As to your practice, if a gentleman walks into my room smelling of iodoform, with a black mark and nitrate of silver upon his right forefinger and a bulge on the right side of his top hat to show where he has secreted his stethoscope. I must be dull indeed if I do not pronounce him to be an active member of the medical profession. I could not help laughing at the ease with which he explained his process of deduction. "When I hear you give your reasons," I remarked, "the thing always appears to me so ridiculously simple that I could easily do it myself, though at each successive instance of your reasoning I am baffled until you explain your process, and yet I believe that my eyes are as good as yours." "Quite so," he answered, lighting a cigarette and throwing himself down into an armchair. "You see, but you do not observe. The distinction's clear. For example, you have frequently seen the steps which lead up from the hall to this room?" "Frequently." "How often?" "Well, some hundreds of times." "And how many are there?" "How many? I don't know." "Quite so. You have not observed, and yet you have seen. That is just my point. Now, I know that there are 17 steps because I have both seen and observed. By the way, since you're interested in these little problems, and since you're good enough to chronicle one or two of my trifling experiences, you may be interested in this." He threw over a sheet of thick, pink-tinted notepaper, which had been lying open upon the table. "It came by the last post," said he. "Read it aloud." The note was undated, and without either signature or address. "There will call upon you tonight at 7:45, it said, "a gentleman who desires to consult you upon a matter of the very deepest moment. Your recent services to one of the royal houses of Europe have shown that you are one who may safely be trusted with matters which are of an importance which can hardly be exaggerated. This account of you we have from all quarters received. Be in your chamber then at that hour, and do not take it amiss if your visitor wears a mask." "This is indeed a mystery," I remarked. "What do you imagine that it means?" "I have no data yet. It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. Insensibly, one begins to twist facts to suit theories instead of theories to suit facts. But the note itself, what do you deduce from it?" I carefully examined the writing and the paper upon which it was written. "The man who wrote it was presumably well-to-do," I remarked, endeavoring to imitate my companion's processes. "Such behavior cannot be bought under half-crown packet. It is peculiarly strong and stiff." "Peculiar. That is the very word," said Holmes. "It is not an English paper at all. Hold it up to the light." I did so, and saw a large E with a small g, and a P and a large G with a small t, woven into the texture of the paper. "What do you make of that?" "Wait, no. Wrong character." "What do you make of that?" asked Holmes.
The name of the maker, no doubt. Or his monogram, rather."
"Not at all. The G, with a small t, stands for Gesellschaft, which is the German for company. Now for the EG. Let us glance at our Continental Gazetteer.
Thank you, Cow of Wisdom. I really appreciate that. That's very nice of you to say. And welcome.
He took down a heavy brown volume from his shelves. Eglau, Eglinitz, here we are, Egria. It is in a German-speaking country in Bohemia, not far from Carlsbad. Remarkable as being the scene of the death of Wallenstein and for its numerous glass factories and paper mills. My boy, what do you make of that?" His eyes sparkled, and he sent up a great blue triumphant cloud from his cigarette. "The paper was made in Bohemia," I said. "Precisely. And the man who wrote the note is a German. Do you note the peculiar construction of the sentence? 'This account of you we have from all quarters received.' A Frenchman or Russian could not have written that. It is the German who is so uncourteous to his verbs. It only remains, therefore, to discover what is wanted by this German who writes upon Bohemian paper and prefers wearing a mask to showing his face. And here he comes, if I am not mistaken, to resolve all our doubts." As he spoke, there was the sharp sound of horses' hoofs and grating wheels against the curb, followed by a sharp pull at the bell. Holmes whistled. I can't whistle. Sorry. Really bad at that. "A pair, by the sound," said he. "Yes," he continued, glancing out of the window. "A nice little Brugam? Brugam? What's a Brugam? Brougham. Should we start a vocabulary tally as we go through this? I've never seen this word before. A nice little Brugam and a pair of beauties. 150 guineas apiece. There's money in this case, Watson, if there is nothing else." "I think that I had better go, Holmes." "Not a bit, Doctor. Stay where you are. I am lost without my Boswell. And this promises to be interesting. It'd be a pity to miss it."
"But your client?"
"Never mind him. I may want your help, and so may he. Now here he comes. You sit down in that armchair, Doctor, and give us your best attention."
It's a type of carriage. Oh, a nice little Brugam and a pair of beauties. Okay, so I take it the beauties are the horses pulling the carriage then. All right. Thanks, Kim.
A slow and heavy step, which had been heard upon the stairs and in the passage, paused immediately outside the door. Then there was a loud and authoritative tap.
Get some Foley work in here.
Yeah.
Ooh. Aha. This works.
"Come in," said Holmes. A man entered who could hardly have been less than 6 feet 6 inches in height, with the chest and limbs of a Hercules. His dress was rich, with a richness,
Weird word choice.
which would, in England, be looked upon as akin to bad taste. Heavy bands of astrakhan were slashed across the sleeves and fronts of his double-breasted coat, while the deep blue cloak, which was thrown over his shoulders, was lined with flame-colored silk and secured at the neck with a brooch, which consisted of a single flaming beryl. Boots which extended halfway up his calves, and which were trimmed at the tops with rich brown fur, completed the impression of barbaric opulence which was suggested by his whole appearance. He carried a broad-brimmed hat in his hand, while he wore across the upper part of his face, extending down past the cheekbones, a black visored mask, which he had apparently adjusted at that very moment, for his hand was still raised to it as he entered. From the lower part of the face he appeared to be a man of strong character, with a thick, hanging lip and a long, straight chin suggestive of resolution, pushed to the length of obstinacy. Delicious. Ah, my good friend, Pythax. Cheers to you. Thank you for joining us on this day, this blessed day. We are reading Sherlock Holmes. Currently, the scandal in Bohemia. This is my first exploration of Holmes. I've not experienced tales of the good detective before this day. Except one time, but that's special, it doesn't count. Anyway, it's more genuine. Ooh. Ooh, I need a new voice for this guy. It says deep, harsh voice and a strongly marked German accent. How am I going to do that? I keep thinking Russian. I keep thinking Russian. Yeah, we should all absolutely get some tea, Cow of Wisdom. Definitely. This is a tea-friendly stream. Arnold Schwarzenegger? Oh my. I can give it a shot. I've never attempted Schwarzenegger. You had my note. That's bad. That's really bad. Gigai DX. Hi, welcome. You're brushing your teeth? Oh, that's cool. I'm happy to be joining you on your hygiene adventure. Welcome to the stream. You had my note. I'm sorry if there's anyone German in the stream. I have never tried German before. I'm so sorry. He asked with a deep, harsh voice and a strongly marked German accent. Oh, hey, thanks for the host too, bud. Thank you. Appreciate that. I told you that I would call. He looked from one to the other of us, as if uncertain which to address. Pray, take a seat, said Holmes. This is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson, who's occasionally good enough to help me in my cases. Whom have I the honor to address? You may address me as the Count von Kram, a Bohemian nobleman. I understand that this gentleman, your friend, is a man of honor. I keep getting back into Russian. This is bad. The accent's better than your actual German. Thank you. You know, that actually makes me feel a little bit better. Thanks. let me start that one over. You may address me as the Count von Kram, a Bohemian nobleman. I understand that this gentleman, your friend, is a man of honor and discretion, whom I may trust with a matter of the most extreme importance. If not, I should much prefer to communicate with you alone. I rose to go, but Holmes caught me by the wrist and pushed me back into my chair. It is both or none, said he. You may say before this gentleman anything which you may say to me. The Count shrugged his broad shoulders. Then I must begin, said he, by binding you both to absolute secrecy for 2 years. At the end of that time, the matter will be of no importance. At present, it is not too much to say that it is of such weight it may have an influence upon European history. I promise, said Holmes. And I like my Watson voice. Watson's just so eager and young in this story. You will excuse this mask, continued our strange visitor. The august person who employs me wishes his agent to be unknown to you, and I may confess at once that the title by which I have just called myself is not exactly my own. I was aware of it, said Holmes dryly. The circumstances are of great delicacy, and every precaution has to be taken to quench what might grow to be an immense scandal and seriously compromise one of the reigning families of Europe. To speak plainly, the matter implicates the great house of Ormstein, hereditary kings of Bohemia. Yeah, this is just straight up Russian. I apparently cannot do German to save my life. So this guy's Russian now, I guess. Our visitor glanced with... Wait. Skipped a line. Yeah. You know, this is something somebody gave me an idea for, which was to have what tea I'm drinking on display so that I don't have to, like, answer questions about it. So this is Twining's Earl Grey. Decaffeinated. Wait, no. Regularly caffeinated, actually. It's my English breakfast that's decaf. Oh yeah, I love Twinings. It's good stuff, right? I'm glad that we have some people who appreciate tea in this chat. You're in good company. Right, so he's just explained that it may have an influence upon European history, I promise. You'll excuse this mask. The title by which I've just called myself is not exactly my own. I was aware of it, said Holmes dryly. Hereditary kings of Bohemia, House of Ormstein. I was also aware of that, murmured Holmes, settling himself down in his armchair and closing his eyes. Our visitor glanced with some apparent surprise at the languid, lounging figure of the man who had been no doubt depicted to him as the most incisive reasoner and most energetic agent in Europe. Holmes slowly reopened his eyes and looked impatiently at his gigantic client. If your Majesty would condescend to state your case, he remarked, I should be better able to advise you. The man sprang from his chair and paced up and down the room in uncontrolled agitation. Then, with a gesture of desperation, he tore the mask from his face and hurled it upon the ground. You are right, he cried. I am the king. Why should I attempt to conceal it? Why, indeed, murmured Holmes. Plot twist already. He's the king, yo. Wow. Your Majesty had not spoken before I was aware that I was addressing Wilhelm Gottsreich Sigismund von Ormstein, Grand Duke of Castle-Felstein and hereditary king of Bohemia. That is a mouthful. Hope I don't have to say that a lot. But you can understand, said our strange visitor, sitting down once more and passing his hand over his high white forehead. You can understand that I am not accustomed to doing such business in my own person. Yet the matter was so delicate that I could not confide it to an agent without putting myself in his power. I have come incognito from Prague for the purpose of consulting you. Oh, you're from London. Hey, that's cool. Jealous? Then pray, consult, said Holmes, shutting his eyes once more. The facts are briefly these. Some 5 years ago, during a lengthy visit to Warsaw, I made the acquaintance of the well-known adventuress, Irene Adler. The name is no doubt familiar to you. Kindly look her up in my index, Doctor, murmured Holmes, without opening his eyes. For many years he had adopted a system of docketing all paragraphs concerning men and things so that it was difficult to name a subject or a person on which he could not at once furnish information.
In this case, I found her biography sandwiched in between that of a Hebrew rabbi and that of a staff commander who had written a monograph upon the deep-sea fishes. Let me see, said Holmes. Born in New Jersey in the year 1858, contralto, La Scala, prima donna, Imperial Opera, Warsaw. Yes, retired from operatic stage, living in London, quite so. Your Majesty, as I understand, became entangled with this young person, wrote her some compromising letters, and is now desirous of getting those letters back. Precisely so. But how? Was there a secret marriage? None. No legal papers or certificates? None. Then I fail to follow, Your Majesty. If this young person should produce her letters for blackmailing or other purposes, how is she to prove their authenticity? There is the writing. Forgery. My private notepaper. Stolen. My own seal. Imitated. My photograph. Bought. We were both in the photograph. Oh dear. That is very bad. Your Majesty has indeed committed an indiscretion. I was mad. Insane. You have compromised yourself seriously. I was only Crown Prince then. I was young. I am but 30 now. It must be recovered. We have tried and failed. Your Majesty must pay. It must be bought. She will not sell. Stolen then. 5 attempts have been made. Twice, burglars in my pay ransacked her house. Once, we diverted her luggage when she traveled. Twice, she has been waylaid. There has been no result. No sign of it? Absolutely none. Holmes laughed. It is quite a pretty little problem. It is quite a pretty little problem, said he. But a very serious one to me, returned the king reproachfully. Very indeed. And what does she propose to do with the photograph? To ruin me. But how? I am about to be married. So I've heard. To Clotilde Lothman von Saxe-Meiningen, second daughter of the King of Scandinavia. You may know the strict principles of her family. She is herself the very soul of delicacy. A shadow of a doubt as to my conduct would bring the matter to an end. And Irene Adler threatens to send them the photograph, and she will do it. I know that she will do it. You do not know her, but she has a soul of steel. She has the face of the most beautiful of women, and the mind of the most resolute of men. Rather than I should marry another woman, there are no lengths to which she would not go. None. You're sure she hasn't sent it yet? I am sure. And why? Because she has said that she would send it on the day when the betrothal was publicly proclaimed. That would be next Monday. Oh, so a week from today. Oh, well, then we have 3 days yet, said Holmes with a yawn. That is very fortunate, as I have 1 or 2 matters of importance to look into just at present. Your Majesty will, of course, stay in London for the present? Certainly. You will find me at the Langham, under the name of the Count von Kram. Then I shall drop you a line to let you know how we progress. Pray do so. I shall be all anxiety. Then, as to money? You have carte blanche. Absolutely. I tell you that I would give one of the provinces of my kingdom to have that photograph. And for present expenses, The king took a heavy chamois leather bag from under his cloak and laid it upon the table. "There are 300 pounds in gold and 700 in notes," he said. Holmes scribbled a receipt upon a sheet of his notebook and handed it to him. "And Mademoiselle's address?" he asked. "Is Briony Lodge, Serpentine Avenue, St. John's Wood." Holmes took a note of it. "One other question," said he. "Was the photograph a cabinet?" "It was." "Then good night, Your Majesty, and I trust that we shall soon have some good news for you. And good night, Watson," he added, as the wheels of the royal brougham rolled down the street. "If you will be good enough to call tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock, I would like to chat this little matter over with you." Okay, looks like that's the end of the first section of that story. Take a little break, chat with you guys. How are you all doing tonight? Or today? I don't count it as being like evening yet until it gets 6 p.m. Still 5:46 over here, so not quite. Doing pretty well, Frost. That's good. That's good. You know, I like this so far. Playing WoW and listening to me. I don't know much about WoW. If I'm being honest, I'm really not interested in WoW. But I've heard that the expansion's good, so I hope you're enjoying it. You love Sherlock Holmes? You know, I respect him. I haven't delved deep enough into this yet to really form an opinion. Maybe by the end of this book, I'll decide whether I like Sherlock Holmes or not. So far, neutral. 10:45 in the land of Aang. Yeah. I have a friend over there too, actually. It's part of the reason why I wanted to stream earlier so that he could catch it. Well, I'm enjoying it enough so far, Frost. Kim, you're doing laundry. All right, that's cool. This is primarily audio experience, so if you want to multitask and do other stuff, I'm not bothered. Not bothered. Stretch. If I'm being honest, I'm getting a little too warm in this thing. I did not think about this when I put this this robe on. I like this robe for the added effect for our storytime corner, but stifling. You're enjoying the background storytelling? Cool. I'm glad. Sir Arthur did it. Yeah, so this robe is from LL Bean. It's actually a funny story. Go commando into the robe. Maybe. I might. Next time. I'll think about it. It's not like you see anything anyway. I'm always sitting down. I was the best man for one of my very close friends' weddings. And so I got him a bunch of wedding gifts. And one of those was a robe fitted to him with a name monogrammed on it. A kind of a nickname, an inside joke between the two of us. Only when it came in, I checked it to make sure everything was fine, and it wasn't, well, I guess not, it wasn't a monogram, because it was a whole name. Anyway, it didn't have the embroidery on it, so I messaged the customer support and told them about what had happened, and they sent me the correct robe, only I had ordered the first robe in gift boxing, so it was very nice. And the replacement robe that they sent was just like in a trash bag, essentially. So I had to do like a textile surgical procedure to excise the bad robe and put the good robe into the gift box without messing anything up, and then give that to him.
And this robe is the bad robe. So we have matching robes. Yay, besties, I guess. By mistake. All right. Section 2 of A Scandal in Bohemia. Actually, how long is this, first of all? How long does this go on? My rain ambiance cut out there. Must be where the loop resets. A fantastic beard. Thank you very much. You know, it used to be much longer, and I recently just, like, cut it all off. Oh. Yeah, it does appear to be pretty short. It looks like it's 3 sections total. Oh, we're over halfway through it, my dudes. Okay. Study in Scarlet is longer, and The Sign of Four. Full novels. Oh, geez. Yeah, we don't have those. Hey, how about I tell you real quick which ones we do have? Or better yet, alright, so we have A Scandal in Bohemia, The Red-Headed League, A Case of Identity, The Boscombe Valley Mystery, The 5 Orange Pips, The Man with the Twisted Lip, The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle, Speckled Band, Engineer's Thumb, Noble Bachelor, Barrel Coronet, and Copper Beaches, and then an afterword. So just to give you an idea, if we have any requests. You listened to 5 Orange Pips today? Oh, that's, wow. Ha. Small world kind of thing, huh? That's neat. Oh, my camera got all messed up because I did that. Let me just try to pull the focus back. Hi. That's better. All right, let's get back into this. This really is far too warm. The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. A Scandal in Bohemia, Part 2. At 3 o'clock precisely, I was at Baker Street, but Holmes had not yet returned. The landlady informed me that he had left the house shortly after 8 o'clock in the morning. I sat down beside the fire, however, with the intention of awaiting him, however long he might be. I was already deeply interested in his inquiry, for, though it was surrounded by none of the grim and strange features which were associated with the 2 crimes which I have already recorded, still, the nature of the case and the exalted station of his client gave it a character of its own. Indeed, apart from the nature of the investigation which my friend had on hand, there was something in his masterly grasp of the situation, and his keen, incisive reasoning, which made it a pleasure to me to study his system of work, and to follow the quick, subtle methods by which he disentangled the most inextricable mysteries. So accustomed was I to his invariable success, that the very possibility of his failing had ceased to enter into my head. It was close upon 4 before the door opened, and a drunken-looking groom, ill-kempt and side-whiskered, with an inflamed face and disreputable clothes, walked into the room. Accustomed as I was to my friend's amazing powers in the use of disguises, I had to look 3 times before I was certain that it was indeed he. With a nod, he vanished into the bedroom, whence he emerged in 5 minutes, tweed-suited and respectable as of old. Putting his hands into his pockets, he stretched out his legs in front of the fire, and laughed heartily for some minutes. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to just laugh heartily for several minutes. That's a lot of voice work. No. Well, really, he cried, and then he choked and laughed again until he was obliged to lie back, limp and helpless in the chair. What is it? It's quite too funny. I am sure you could never guess how I employed my morning, or what I ended up by doing. I can't imagine. I suppose that you have been watching the habits, and perhaps the house, of Miss Irene Adler?
Quite so, but the sequel was rather unusual. I will tell you, however, I left the house a little after 8 o'clock this morning in the character of a groom out of work. There is a wonderful sympathy and freemasonry among horsey men. Be one of them, and you will know all that there is to know. I soon found Bryony Lodge. It's a bijou villa with a garden at the back, but built out front right up to the road, 2 stories. Chubb locked to the door, large sitting room on the side, well furnished, with long windows almost to the floor, and those preposterous English window fasteners which a child could open. Behind there was nothing remarkable, save that the passage window could be reached from the top of the coach house. I walked round it and examined it closely from every point of view, but without noting anything else of interest. I then lounged down the street and found, as I expected, that there was a mews in a lane which runs down by one wall of the garden. I lent the ostlers a hand in rubbing down their horses and received in exchange 2 pence, a glass of half and half, 2 fills of shag tobacco, and as much information as I could desire about Miss Adler, to say nothing of half a dozen other people in the neighborhood in whom I was not in the least interested, but whose biographies I was compelled to listen to.
And what of Irene Adler?
I asked. Oh, she's turned all the men's heads down in that part. She's the daintiest thing under a bonnet on this planet. So say the Serpentine Mews, to a man. She lives quietly, sings at concerts, drives out at 5 every day, returns at 7 sharp for dinner. Seldom goes out at other times, except when she sings. There's only one male visitor, but a good deal of him. He's dark, handsome, dashing, never calls less than once a day, often twice. He's a Mr. Godfrey Norton of the Inner Temple. See the advantages of a cabman as a confidant. They had driven him home a dozen times from Serpentine Mews and knew all about him. When I had listened to all they had to tell, I began to walk up and down near Bryony Lodge once more and to think over my plan of campaign. This Godfrey Norton was evidently an important factor in the matter. He was a lawyer. That sounded ominous. What was the relation between them, and what the object of his repeated visits? Was she his client, his friend, or his mistress? If the former, she had probably transferred the photograph to his keeping. If the latter, it was less likely. On the issue of this question depended whether I should continue my work at Bryony Lodge or turn my attention to the gentlemen's chambers in the temple. It was a delicate point, and it widened the field of my inquiry. I fear that I bore you with these details, but I have to let you see my little difficulties if you're to understand the situation.
I am following you closely,
I answered. I was still balancing the matter in my mind when a handsome cab drove up to Bryony Lodge and a gentleman sprang out. He was a remarkably handsome man, dark, aquiline, and mustached, evidently the man of whom I had heard. He appeared to be in a great hurry, shouted to the cabman to wait, and brushed past the maid, who opened the door with the air of a man who was thoroughly at home. He was in the house about half an hour, and I could catch glimpses of him in the windows of the sitting room, pacing up and down, talking excitedly, waving his arms. Of her I could see nothing. Presently he emerged, looking even more flurried than before. As he stepped up to the cab, he pulled a gold watch from his pocket and looked at it earnestly. "Drive like the devil," he shouted. "First to Gross and Hankey's in Regent Street, and then to the Church of St. Monica and the Edgware Road. Half a guinea if you do it in 20 minutes. Away they went, and as I was just wondering whether or not I should do well to follow them, when up the lane came a neat little landau, coachman with his coat only half buttoned, and his tie under his ear, while all the tags of his harness were sticking out of the buckles. They hadn't pulled up before she shot out of the hall door and into it. I only caught a glimpse of her at the moment, but she was a lovely woman, with a face that a man might die for. "The Church of St. Monica, John," she cried, "and half a sovereign if you reach it in 20 minutes. This was quite too good to lose, Watson. I was just balancing whether I should run for it or whether I should perch behind her landau when a cab came through the street. Driver looked twice at such a shabby fare, but I jumped in before he could object. Church of St. Monica, said I, and half a sovereign if you reach it in 20 minutes. It was 25 minutes to 12, and of course it was clear enough what was in the wind. My cabbie drove fast. I don't think I ever drove faster, but the others were there before us. The cab and the landau with their steaming horses were in front of the door when I arrived. I paid the man and hurried into the church. Not a soul there save the two whom I had followed and the surpliced clergyman, who seemed to be expostulating with him. They were all three standing in a knot in front of the altar. I lounged up the side aisle like any other idler who's dropped into a church. Suddenly, to my surprise, the three at the altar faced around to me, and Godfrey Norton came running as hard as he could toward me. "Thank God," he cried. "You'll do. Come, come." "What then?" I asked. "Come, man, come. Only 3 minutes or it won't be legal." I was half dragged up to the altar, and before I knew it, where I was, I found myself mumbling responses which were whispered in my ear and vouching for things of which I knew nothing, generally assisting on the secure tying up of Irene Adler, spinster, to Godfrey Norton, bachelor. It was all done in an instant. There was the gentleman thanking me on the one side, the lady on the other, while the clergyman beamed on me in front. It was the most preposterous position in which I ever found myself in my life, and it was the thought of it that started me laughing just now. It seems that there had been some informality about their license, that the clergyman absolutely refused to marry him without a witness of some sort, and that my lucky appearance saved the bridegroom from having to sally out into the streets in search of a best man. The bride gave me a sovereign, and I mean to wear it on my watch chain in memory of the occasion. "This is a very unexpected turn of affairs," said I. "And what then?" "Well, I found my plans very seriously menaced. It looked as if the pair might take an immediate departure, and so necessitate very prompt and energetic measures on my part. At the church door, however, they separated, he driving back to the temple and she to her own house. "I shall drive out in the park at 5 as usual," she said as she left him. I heard no more. They drove away in different directions, and I went off to make my own arrangements. "Which are?" "Some cold beef and a glass of beer." Oh, that was perfect with the Texan accent. Beef and beer. Oh, boy. Sorry, I'm catching up on the chat since that kind of threw me out of the moment. Oh, a fireplace background. Ooh, that could be cool. You know, I'm not sure how I could set that up. I guess I'd have to have a green screen or something. Maybe I can do like a jerry-rigged version where I just take like a YouTube video feed of a fireplace or whatever. Doesn't Netflix have something like that? Just a fireplace for hours? And just have that on the screen and then make me smaller or something. I don't know. I'll talk to some people and come up with some ideas. That's a good one though. I like that. You want a sub? Oh, my stars and garters. That's cool. Yeah, if you can help me get some followers, I'd love it. Yeah, it'd be really cool to become affiliate. I would definitely do this more often if I had subscribers, obviously. Still, even just your willingness to sub, just saying that means a lot to me. Thank you very much, Cow of Wisdom. Small TV monitor. Oh, you know what? I might be able to do this. It's going to take some moving things around, but I keep looking to the side here because that's where my second monitor is. You can't see it. It's off screen, but that's where I have my chat so I can talk to you guys. I could set this as my background fireplace. Maybe move these boxes. Something just fell. Anyway, just an idea. Hey, thanks again, everybody who's here. I appreciate your company. This is something I've been wanting to do for months now, and just
finally decide to pull the trigger on it and just do it. Thanks. Right. I went off to make my own arrangements, which are some cold beef and a glass of beer. He answered, ringing the bell. I've been too busy to think of food, and I'm likely to be busier still this evening. By the way, Doctor, I shall want your cooperation. I shall be delighted. You don't mind breaking the law? Not in the least. Wow. Nor running a chance of arrest? Not in a good cause. Oh, the cause is excellent. Then I am your man. I was sure I might rely on you. But what is it that you wish? When Mrs. Turner has brought in the tray, I'll make it clear to you. Now, he said as he turned hungrily on the simple fare that our landlady had provided. It's been a while since I got to narrate anything lengthy like that. I must discuss it while I eat, for I have not much time. It is nearly 5 now. In 2 hours we must be on the scene of action. Miss Irene, or Madam, rather, returns from her drive at 7. We must be at Bryony Lodge to meet her. And what then? You must leave that to me. I've already arranged what is to occur. There's only one point on which I must insist. You must not interfere, come what may. You understand? I am to be neutral? To do nothing whatever. There will probably be some small unpleasantness. Do not join in it. It will end in my being conveyed into the house. 4 or 5 minutes afterward, the sitting room window will open. You're to station yourself close to that open window. Yes. You're to watch me, for I will be visible to you. Yes. And when I raise my hand so, you will throw into the room what I give you to throw, and will, at the same time, raise the cry of fire. You quite follow me? Entirely. It's nothing very formidable, he said, taking a long cigar-shaped roll from his pocket. It is an ordinary plumber's smoke rocket, fitted with a cap at either end to make it self-lighting. Your task is confined to that. When you raise your cry of fire, it will be taken up by quite a number of people. You may then walk to the end of the street, and I will rejoin you in 10 minutes. I hope I've made myself clear. I am to remain neutral, to get near the window to watch you, and at the signal to throw in this object, and then to raise the cry of fire, and to wait you at the corner of the street. Precisely. Then you may entirely rely on me. That's excellent. I think perhaps it's almost time that I prepare for the new role I have to play. He disappeared into his bedroom and returned in a few minutes in the character of an amiable and simple-minded, nonconformist clergyman. His broad black hat, his baggy trousers, his white tie, his sympathetic smile and general look of peering and benevolent curiosity were such as Mr. John Hare alone could have equaled. It was not merely that Holmes changed his costume, his expression, his manner, his very soul seemed to vary with every fresh part that he assumed. The stage lost a fine actor, even as science lost an acute reasoner when he became a specialist in crime. It was 6:15 when we left Baker Street, and it still wanted 10 minutes to the hour when we found ourselves in Serpentine Avenue. It was already dusk, and the lamps were just being lighted as we paced up and down in front of Bryony Lodge, waiting for the coming of its occupant. The house was just such as I had pictured it from Sherlock Holmes's succinct description, but the locality appeared to be less private than I expected. On the contrary, for a small street in a quiet neighborhood, it was remarkably animated. There was a group of shabbily dressed men smoking and laughing in a corner, a scissors grinder with his wheel, 2 guardsmen who were flirting with a nurse girl, and several well-dressed young men who were lounging up and down with cigars in their mouths. "You see," remarked Holmes, as we paced to and fro in front of the house, This marriage rather simplifies matters. The photograph becomes a double-edged weapon now. Chances are that she'd be as averse to its being seen by Mr. Godfrey Norton as our client is to its coming to the eyes of his princess. Now the question is, where are we to find the photograph?
Where indeed?
It's most likely that she carries it about with her. It is cabinet size, too large for easy concealment about a woman's dress. She knows that the king's capable of having her waylaid and searched. 2 attempts of the sort have already been made. We may take it, then, that she does not carry it about with her.
Where, then?
Her banker, or her lawyer. There is that double possibility, but I am inclined to think neither. Women are naturally secretive, and they like to do their own secreting. Why should she hand it over to anyone else? She could trust her own guardianship, but she could not tell what indirect or political influence might be brought to bear upon a businessman. Besides, remember that she had resolved to use it within a few days. It must be where she can lay her hands upon it. It must be in her own house.
But it has twice been burgled.
Psh, they didn't know how to look.
But how will you look?
I won't look.
What then?
I'll get her to show me.
But she will refuse.
She will not be able to. I hear the rumble of wheels. It's her carriage. Now carry out my orders to the letter.
As he spoke, the gleam of the side lights of the carriage came round the curve of the avenue. It was a smart little landau which rattled up to the door of Briony Lodge. As it pulled up, one of the loafing men at the corner dashed forward to open the door in the hope of earning a copper, but was elbowed away by another loafer, who had rushed up with the same intention. A fierce quarrel broke out, which was increased by the 2 guardsmen who took sides with one of the loungers, and by the scissors grinder, who was equally hot upon the other side. A blow was struck, and in an instant the lady, who had stepped from her carriage, was the center of a little knot of flushed and struggling men, who struck savagely at each other with their fists and sticks. Holmes dashed into the crowd to protect the lady, but just as he reached her, he gave a cry and dropped to the ground with the blood running freely from his face. At his fall, the guardsmen took to their heels in one direction and the loungers in the other, while a number of better-dressed people who had watched the scuffle without taking part in it crowded in to help the lady and to attend to the injured man. Irene Adler, as I will still call her, had hurried up the steps, but she stood at the top with her superb figure outlined against the lights of the hall, looking back into the street.
Ooh. I have to actually give her a voice now. Until now, we'd only heard her voice as told through Holmes, but now I have to actually give Irene Adler a voice. We've got Texan. How about Southern Belle? Is the poor gentleman much hurt?
She asked.
He is dead! He is dead! He's dead! He's dead! He's dead!
Cried several voices. Not sure I'm supposed to do several voices.
No, there's life in him!
Shouted another.
But he'll be gone before you can get him to a hospital!
This is just some random background person. He's a brave fellow. Wait, this is a different woman. Oh, this is a terrible scene for me. I'm just going to push through this. He's a brave fellow, said a woman. They would have had the lady's purse and watch if it hadn't been for him. They were a gang, and a rough one, too. Ah, he's breathing now. He can't lie in the street. May we bring him in, Marm? Surely. Bring him into the sitting room. There's a comfortable sofa. This way, please.
Slowly and solemnly, he was borne into Briony Lodge and laid out in the principal room, while I still observed the proceedings from my post by the window. The lamps had been lit, but the blinds had not been drawn, so that I could see Holmes as he lay upon the couch. I do not know whether he was seized with compunction at that moment for the part he was playing, but I know that I never felt more heartily ashamed of myself in my life than when I saw the beautiful creature against whom I was conspiring, or the grace and kindliness with which she waited upon the injured man. And yet it would be the blackest treachery to Holmes to draw back now from the part which he had entrusted to me. I hardened my heart, and took the smoke rocket from under my ulster. After all, I thought, we are not injuring her. We are but preventing her from injuring another. Holmes had sat upon the couch, and I saw him motion like a man who is in need of air. A maid rushed across and threw open the window. At the same instant, I saw him raise his hand, and at the signal, I tossed my rocket into the room with a cry of, "Fire!" The word was no sooner out of my mouth than the whole crowd of spectators, well-dressed and ill gentlemen, ostlers, and servant maids, joined in a general shriek of fire. Thick clouds of smoke curled through the room and out at the open window. I caught a glimpse of rushing figures, and a moment later the voice of Holmes from within assuring them that it was a false alarm. Slipping through the shouting crowd, I made my way to the corner of the street, and in 10 minutes was rejoiced to find my friend's arm in mine and to get away from the scene of uproar. He walked away swiftly and in silence for some few minutes until we had turned down one of the quiet streets which led towards the Edgware Road. "You did it very nicely, Doctor," he remarked. "Nothing could have been better. It's all right." "You have the photograph?" "I know where it is." "And how did you find out?" "She showed me, as I told you she would." "I'm still in the dark." "I do not wish to make a mystery," said he, laughing. "The matter is perfectly simple. You, of course, saw that everyone in the street was an accomplice. They were all engaged for the evening." "I guessed as much." "Then, when the row broke out, I had a little moist red paint in the palm of my hand. I rushed forward, fell down, clapped my hand to my face, and became a piteous spectacle. It's an old trick." Sherlock Holmes just grifted these people, just conned them. That's amazing. He's a con artist. That's cool. All right, I like this more now. That's fun. "That I could also fathom." Let me take that line again. "That also I could fathom." "Then they carried me in. She's bound to have me in. What else could she do? And into her sitting room, which was the very room which I suspected. It lay between that and her bedroom, and I was determined to see which. They laid me on a couch, I motioned for air, they were compelled to open the window, and you had your chance." "How did that help you?" "It was all important. When a woman thinks her house is on fire, her instinct is at once to rush to the one thing she values most. It's a perfectly overpowering impulse, and I have more than once taken advantage of it. In the case of the Darlington substitution scandal, it was of use to me, and also in the Arnsworth Castle substitution business. No, just Arnsworth Castle business, read that wrong. A married woman grabs at her baby. Unmarried one reaches for her jewel box. Now it's clear to me that Our Lady of today had nothing in the house more precious to her than what we are in quest of. She would rush to secure it. The alarm of fire was admirably done. The smoke and shouting were enough to shake nerves of steel. She responded beautifully. The photograph's in a recess behind a sliding panel just above the right bell pull. She was there in an instant, and I caught a glimpse of it as she half drew it out. When I cried out it was a false alarm, she replaced it, glanced at the rocket, rushed from the room. And I've not seen her since. I rose and, making my excuses, escaped from the house. I hesitated whether to attempt to secure the photograph at once, but the coachman had come in, and as he was watching me narrowly, it seemed safer to wait. A little over precipitance may ruin all. "And now?" I asked. Our quest is practically finished. I'll call with the king tomorrow, and with you, if you care to come with us. We'll be shown in the sitting room to wait for the lady, but it's probable that when she comes, she may find neither us nor the photograph. It might be a satisfaction to His Majesty to regain it with his own hands.
And when will you call?
At 8 in the morning. She won't be up, so we shall have a clear field. Besides, we must be prompt, for this marriage may mean a complete change in her life and habits. I must wire to the king without delay. We had reached Baker Street and had stopped at the door. He was searching his pockets for the key when someone passing said,
Good night, Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
I'm not sure who that should have been. So I'll just, do a weird voice for that one, I guess. Because it doesn't say who.
There were several people on the pavement at the time, but the greeting appeared to come from a slim youth in an ulster who had hurried by.
I heard that voice before.
Said Holmes, staring down the dimly lit street.
I wonder who the deuce that could have been.
That's part 2. There's only one left, and it's very short. So I'm checking in with you guys, taking a little minute break here.
We should have this tied up within the hour. You know, I like the starting at 5 o'clock business. Sometimes when I start at my previous usual time, which is 7, I get really tired by the end of it. Streaming takes a lot out of me. Having this heavy robe on doesn't help. Hot. I don't deal well with heat. And yet I'm drinking tea. Go figure. But come on, I've got to. It's Sherlock Holmes. And it's my stream. My icon is this mug now. This rain is really nice. It's a good mug. Thanks, Frost. You know where I got it? Dan. You remember Dan, right? D&D Dan. He gave this to me in my senior year at Barry, 2012. And it has been my favorite mug ever since. Hey, Mr. Toast, 02. I see that we have some similarity in our names, actually. Mars 2, Mr. Toast 2. That's cool. Welcome to the stream. Cheers to you. Thanks for that follow. Apparently I'm doing a pretty good job today. Thank you. So, shall we finish off part 3 of
The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, A Scandal in Bohemia.
part 3? Pretty sure this is the last part. I'm really glad you're excited for this, Frost. It seems like I picked a good one tonight. I've got a few other books in the queue. We might bounce around to different ones. Or I might just go through all Sherlock Holmes. I don't know. I'll do a poll or something. Stay tuned.
I slept at Baker Street that night, and we were engaged upon our toast and coffee.
Hey, Toast. Just like our new follower.
Our toast and coffee in the morning when the King of Bohemia rushed into the room.
You've really got it.
He cried.
Wait, no. The King of Bohemia. I gotta do that voiceover.
You have really got it! He cried, grasping Sherlock Holmes by either shoulder and looking eagerly into his face.
Not yet.
But you have hopes.
I have hopes.
Then come. I am all impatience to be gone.
We must have a cab.
No, my brougham is waiting.
Then that'll simplify matters.
We descended and started off once more for Bryony Lodge,
Irene Adler's married.
remarked Holmes. Married? When?
Yesterday.
But to whom?
To an English lawyer named Norton.
But she could not love him.
I'm in hopes that she does.
And why in hopes?
'Cause it'd spare your majesty all fear of future annoyance. If the lady loves her husband, she does not love your majesty. If she does not love your majesty, there's no reason why she should interfere with your majesty's plan.
It is true. And yet, well, I wish she had been of my own station. What a queen she would have made. He relapsed into a moody silence, which was not broken.
Wait, I'm still doing the Russian.
Which was not broken until we drew up in Serpentine Avenue.
I'm still doing the Russian. Oh, it's hard to get out of that.
The door of Bryony Lodge was open, and an elderly woman stood upon the steps. She watched us with a sardonic eye as we stepped from the brougham.
An elderly woman. There's a lot of characters in this. Okay.
Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I believe.
That one's gonna be tough on my voice.
Said she,
I am Mr. Holmes.
answered my companion, looking at her with a questioning and rather startled gaze.
Indeed. My mistress told me that you were likely to call. She left this morning with her husband by the 5:15 train from Charing Cross for the continent.
What? So I wasn't expecting that. What?
Sherlock Holmes staggered back, white with chagrin and surprise.
Do you mean she's left England?
Never to return.
And the papers? Asked the king hoarsely. All is lost.
We shall see.
He pushed past the servant and rushed into the drawing room, followed by the king and myself. The furniture was scattered about in every direction, with dismantled shelves and open drawers, as if the lady had hurriedly ransacked them before her flight. Holmes rushed at the bell pull, tore back a small sliding shutter, and plunging in his hand, pulled out a photograph and a letter. The photograph was of Irene Adler in an evening dress. The letter was superscribed to Sherlock Holmes, Esquire, to be left till called for.
Bum bum bum. Predicted.
My friend tore it open,
And we all three read it together? Oh God, I can't, okay, that's not happening. I can't do three voices at once, obviously.
It was dated at midnight of the preceding night, and ran in this way.
I'm gonna do Irene Adler, since she's the one who wrote it, presumably, and we haven't gotten enough of that Southern Belle voice yet.
Him.
My dear Mr. Sherlock Holmes, you really did it very well. You took me in completely. Until after the alarm of fire, I had not a suspicion. But then, when I found out how I had betrayed myself, I began to think. I had been warned against you months ago. I had been told that if the king employed an agent, it would certainly be you. And your address had been given me. Yet with all this, you made me reveal what you wanted to know. Even after I became suspicious, I found it hard to think evil of such a dear, kind old clergyman. But you know, I have been trained as an actress myself. Male costumes, nothing new to me. I often take advantage of the freedom which it gives. I sent John, the coachman, to watch you, ran upstairs, got into my walking clothes, as I call them, and came down just as you departed. Well, I followed you to your door, and so made sure that I was really an object of interest to the celebrated Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Then I, rather imprudently, wished you good night, and started for the temple to see my husband. We both thought the best resource was flight, when pursued by so formidable an antagonist. So you will find the nest empty when you call tomorrow. As to the photograph, your client may rest in peace. I love and am loved by a better man than he. The king may do what he will without hindrance from one whom he has cruelly wronged. I keep it only to safeguard myself and to preserve a weapon which will always secure me from any steps which he might take in the future. I leave a photograph which he might care to possess, and I remain, dear Mr. Sherlock Holmes, very truly yours, Irene Norton, née Adler.
That was fun. Whew. What a woman! Oh, what a woman! Cried the King of Bohemia, when we had all three read this epistle. Did I not tell you how quick and resolute she was? Would she not have made an admirable queen? Is it not a pity that she was not on my level?
Get on my level.
From what I've seen of the lady, she seems indeed to be on a very different level to your majesty, said Holmes coldly. I'm sorry that I've not been able to bring your majesty's business to a more successful conclusion. On the contrary, my dear sir, cried the king, nothing could be more successful. I know that her word is inviolate. The photograph is now as safe as if it were in the fire. I'm glad to hear your majesty say so. I am immensely indebted to you. Pray tell me in what way I can reward you. This ring. He slipped an emerald snake ring from his finger and held it out upon the palm of his hand. Your majesty has something which I should value even more highly, said Holmes. You have but to name it. This photograph! You scoundrel. The king stared at him in amazement. Irene's photograph, he cried. Certainly, if you wish it. I thank your majesty. Then there's no more to be done in the matter. I have the honor to wish you a very good morning. He bowed, and turning away without observing the hand which the king had stretched out to him,
Oh, don't leave him hanging, dog.
he set off in my company for his chambers. And that was how a great scandal threatened to affect the kingdom of Bohemia, and how the best plans of Sherlock Holmes were beaten by a woman's wit. He used to make merry over the cleverness of women, but I have not heard him do it of late. And when he speaks of Irene Adler, or when he refers to her photograph, it is always under the honorable title of the woman.
Ta-da! This has been... Wait a second. What was the name of the... I forgot what the name of it was. This has been...
The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. A scandal in Bohemia.
Oh, by the way, there's an illustration. I almost forgot to do this. Because I was in, like, the middle of a sentence, so I just had to, like, go straight over it. But let's see how well this picks it up. Yeah, there you go.
I don't want to hurt the spine of the book. But, yeah, there's an illustration. So I'm guessing that's the photograph of Irene Adler in the evening dress, and perhaps Holmes standing behind it. It's nice. Yeah, I like the illustration. It adds a certain rustic charm. I like that. Okay. Well, let me see. Fun fact? Cool. Yeah, I'd like to take a few minutes to just kind of chill with people. That only took like an hour and a half. I think I'd be good for doing like some more reading, actually. Maybe I could go till like 8. The original printing in the magazines is in the late 1800s had illustrations. Oh, that's really cool. Nice. Even the original manuscript had accessory visual material. That's awesome. I will, of course, procure another cup, steaming cup of Twining's Earl Grey. Because this one's out. Let me see what the lengths of some of these are. Is that the shortest one? It's 22. Well, the next one's about just as long. It's the Red-Headed League. Oh, A Case of Identity is even shorter than that. Huh. You know, they're all roughly the same length. Like, just within a few pages of each other. This is nice. I like this. Do well with the Red-Headed League? Awesome. What do you guys think of the voices? Should I continue with the voices as they are, or like mix them up to try different things in each story? Like, should I continue with Texan Holmes, or make him something else? You guys think about that and chat about it. I am gonna make tea, and I'll be back in a bit. Just gonna set that there. Yeah, that's nice, huh? Cool. Ugh. Back in a bit.
Oh, my glasses. I'm not fully in character. Yes. I've returned to you, my friends. If I can move my stray hairs into position. There. Perfect. Just like Sherlock Holmes. My favorite book today. The best thing I've read all day. It's the only thing I've read all day. Well, actually, no. I read a chapter out of the Adventures of graphic novel. Which was wonderful, of course. Okay. I've got my tea. So, I'm going to enjoy a little bit of that before we dig into, what was it, the Red-Headed League is next. Yes. And thank you all again for joining me. I'm going to leave this up for a bit here because I'm technically still on tea break. Not jumping back into this just yet. Give me a couple of minutes. I was talking for an hour and a half, so my voice. Oh, I should put some honey in this. Yeah, I talked about earlier how I'm trying to give up sweetener, but the honey is for my throat. And if we're going to do tea, let's do it right. With some proper, oh, my backwards, Pepperidge Farm Chessman biscuits. I discovered tea dueling was a thing when I went to Dragon Con. And they used these biscuits specifically with English breakfast tea, specifically for the tea duel. Showing too much skin. Ugh, not enough though. Stuffy. Okay. To perform the tea duel, select your biscuit, dunk for 5 count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Raise. Here's a little trick. And then hold. For as long as you dare before consuming it. The objective is to consume the entire thing before it falls apart. It's long enough. Almost messed that up. Let's see what you guys are talking about in the chat. Oh yeah, I put the. Oh, where'd he go? I guess he fell somewhere. I put the index card up so that you could have a face for the chair, since I saw Looney or Marauder had complained that there wasn't a face this time. Yeah, Hubert. Hubert, because that's the name of my grandfather, so I remember that. Oh yes, and thank you again, Josh, for hosting. Pleasure to have you aboard. That's really cool history stuff there, Frost. You know, I should realize, being someone who studied history, is a librarian, and enjoys Sherlock Holmes, you'd have some trivia.
So I'm glad that you're enjoying the stream, because it seems right up your alley. It made you smile? Awesome. That was the point. If I could take 5 seconds out of my day to make someone smile, then I've done a good job. Alright, let's do a couple more biscuits. And we'll get back into it. So, has anybody else here, besides Frost, read Sherlock Holmes? And if so, what's your opinion? I like it so far, but I'm only one story in, so there's a lot more to... Practicing that dunking. You're going down, my dude. I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you with these chessmen. Bring it. I keep other biscuits in here. Although, since I'm doing voice work, I probably shouldn't. So, I'll just keep with the tea and put the biscuits away. This will be my treat for a job well done when the stream is over. I'll have another cup of tea and enjoy some biscuits with it. Put away my chessmen. Lyra! Hi. Thanks for joining us. We're having a lovely time. I've been told that this is the most relaxing stream on Twitch, and that was quite flattering. From, oh, what was their name? Cow Wisdom? Was it Cow Wisdom? Please forgive me, I just have a terrible memory. It's not an insult to you. I am in a good mood today. It's been really nice seeing like the positivity in response to my idea for doing this today, for doing this book reading stream. So, yeah, it's really pleasant. I like reading. I enjoy socializing to an extent. Socializing in the vein of reading, especially when I'm like, you know, the star of the show, because I'm a diva like that, is very nice. The Cow of Wisdom. That's right. Thank you, Kim. Empire. Yeah, they even said that they would sub to me if they could. They can't, unfortunately. I'm not an affiliate yet. Maybe we can fix that soon. That'd be nice, huh? All right. Because games, I can't really do on my computer. Like high-end games that draw in the crowds, you know. But I could do some novel experiences. You get it? Only because Lyra's here. That's my one pun today. That's my one. Leave this place, leave my own stream? No. You fool. Of course I won't do that. Then what? You'll just have you'll have Hubert and the sound of the rain and no Sherlock Holmes. Thank you for the smile, good sir. Aw, you're welcome, Lyra. I didn't see anyone talking about whether they'd like me to use the same voices as before or use different ones. So I'm just going to keep going with the same ones for now. Maybe I'll change it up between streams. Same voices are good for you? Great. Cool. Then they're good for me too. Let's go. Stay hydrated. Especially if you're reading something out loud. Text and Sherlock, it's fun, isn't it? Yeah. I practiced the opening paragraph of the story that we just finished several times, like using a few different voices until I realized, like, oh man, Texan Sherlock Holmes, that'll be fun. This is going to be good. Oh, yeah, you're just in time for us to start.
The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Red-Headed League. I had called upon my friend, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, one day in the autumn of last year, and found him in deep conversation with a very stout, florid-faced, elderly gentleman with fiery red hair. With an apology for my intrusion, I was about to withdraw when Holmes pulled me abruptly into the room and closed the door behind me. You could not have possibly come at a better time, my dear Watson, he said cordially.
I was afraid that you were engaged.
So I am. Very much so.
Then I can wait in the next room.
Not at all. This gentleman, Mr. Wilson, has been my partner and helper in many of my most successful cases, and I have no doubt that he will be of the utmost use to me and yours also. The stout gentleman half rose from his chair and gave a bob of greeting, with a quick little questioning glance from his small, fat, encircled eyes.
Try the settee,
said Holmes, relapsing into his armchair and putting his fingertips together, as was his custom when in judicial moods.
I know, my dear Watson, that you share my love of all that is bizarre and outside the conventions and humdrum routine of everyday life. You've shown your relish for it by the enthusiasm which has prompted you to chronicle, and, if you'll excuse my saying so, somewhat to embellish so many of my own little adventures. Your cases have indeed been of the greatest interest to me,
I observed.
You'll remember that I remarked the other day, just before we went into the very simple problem presented by Miss Mary Sutherland, that for strange effects and extraordinary combinations, we must go to life itself, which is always far more daring than any effort of the imagination. Hey, Time Lord. Thanks for joining us. The Southern character is Sherlock Holmes. I decided to make Sherlock Holmes Texan Holmes. It's fun. I like it. It's an interesting departure from the norm. Reimagining. Let me try that again. You'll remember that I remarked the other day, just before we went into the very simple problem presented by Miss Mary Sutherland, that for strange effects and extraordinary combinations, we must go to life itself, which is always far more daring than any effort of the imagination. A proposition which I took the liberty of doubting.
You did, Doctor. Nonetheless, you must come round to my view, for otherwise I shall keep on piling fact upon fact on you until your reason breaks down under them and acknowledges me to the right. Now, Mr. Jabez Wilson here has been good enough to call upon me this morning, and to begin a narrative which promises to be one of the most singular which I have listened to for some time. You've heard me remark that the strangest and most unique things are very often connected not with the larger, but with the smaller crimes, and occasionally, indeed, where there's room for doubt whether any positive crime's been committed. As far as I've heard, it's impossible for me to say whether the present case is an instance of crime or not, but the course of events is certainly among the most singular that I've ever listened to. Perhaps, Mr. Wilson, you would have the great kindness to recommence your narrative. I ask you not merely because my friend Dr. Watson's not heard the opening part, but also because the peculiar nature of the story makes me anxious to have every possible detail from your lips. As a rule, when I've heard some slight indication of the course of events, I am able to guide myself by the thousands of other similar cases which occurred in my memory.
In the present instance, I'm forced to admit that the facts are, to the best of my belief, unique. Time to listen to this instead of music. Awesome. Hi, Leslie. I'm so thankful that you guys have joined me. Thanks. This is fun. Hard on the voice, though. Okay.
The portly client puffed out his chest with an appearance of some little pride and pulled a dirty and wrinkled newspaper from the inside pocket of his greatcoat as he glanced down the advertisement column with his head thrust forward and the paper flattened out upon his knee. I took a good look at the man and endeavored, after the fashion of my companion, to read the indications which might be presented by his dress or appearance. I did not gain very much, however, by my inspection. Our visitor bore every mark of being an average, commonplace British tradesman, obese, pompous, and slow. He wore rather baggy grey shepherd's check trousers, a not over-clean black frock coat unbuttoned in the front, and a drab waistcoat with a heavy brassy Albert chain, and a square pierced bit of metal dangling down as an ornament. A frayed top hat and a faded brown overcoat with a wrinkled velvet collar lay upon a chair beside him. Altogether, look as I would, there was nothing remarkable about the man save his blazing red head, and the expression of extreme chagrin and discontent upon his features. Sherlock Holmes's quick eye took in my occupation, and he shook his head with a smile as he noticed my questioning glances. Beyond the obvious facts that he has at some time done manual... Wait. I kept going with the narrator voice, I gotta back up. Sherlock Holmes's quick eye took in my occupation, and he shook his head with a smile as he noticed my questioning glances. Beyond the obvious facts that he has at some time done manual labor, that he takes snuff, that he's a Freemason, that he's been in China, and that he's done a considerable amount of writing lately, I can deduce nothing else. Mr. Chavez Wilson started up in his chair, with his forefinger upon the paper, but his eyes upon my companion.
Ooh, I have to give him a voice now. So he's portly, stout. Okay, he's obese, pompous, and slow. British tradesman, average commonplace British tradesman, obese, pompous, and slow.
How in the name of good fortune did you know all that, Mr. Holmes?
How about that?
He asked. How did you know, for example, that I did manual labor? It's as true as gospel, for I began as a ship's carpenter.
Your hands, my dear sir. Your right hand is quite a size larger than your left. You've worked with it, and the muscles are more developed.
Well, the snuff, then, and the Freemasonry.
I won't insult your intelligence by telling you how I read that, especially as, rather against the strict rules of your order, you use an arc and compass breastpin.
Ah, of course. I forgot that. But the writing.
What else can be indicated by that right cuff so very shiny for 5 inches and the left one with the smooth patch near the elbow where you rested upon the desk?
Well, but China?
The fish that you have tattooed immediately above your right wrist could have only been done in China. I've made a small study of tattoo marks and have even contributed to the literature of the subject. Wow, that's cool. What a renaissance man. That trick of staining the fish's scales of a delicate pink is quite peculiar to China. When in addition I see a Chinese coin hanging from your watch chain, the matter becomes even more simple. Mr. Jabez Wilson laughed heavily. Well, I never, said he. I thought that at first you had done something clever, but I see that there was nothing in it after all. I begin to think, Watson, said Holmes, that I made a mistake in explaining.
Oh gosh, here's some Latin. Okay, Texan accent Latin words. Good luck to me, I guess.
Omne ignotum pro magnifico. You know? And my poor little reputation, such as it is, will suffer shipwreck if I am so candid. Can you not find the advertisement, Mr. Wilson? Yes, I've got it now, he answered with his thick and red finger planted halfway down the column.
Texan Latin, yeah.
Here it is. This is what began it all. You just read it for yourself, sir.
I think this voice is working. I need to turn a light on, though. I'll open up my window blinds. It's getting too low light in here for me to actually read the text. Give me a second. As I do not yank the headset cord out of its socket. Is that better? That's much better. Okay, great. Whew. Low, robust voice. I think we're pretty much approaching that. I think we pretty much got that. Right. Whoa, 14 viewers. How did that happen? Hi. Welcome to my storytime corner. I guess since I'm taking a break here. For anyone who's joining us, hi, I'm Mars, and I'm trying something new today, tonight, whatever. Reading a public domain book and commenting and chatting. It's been a lot of fun so far. I've never done Sherlock Holmes before. Let's get back into it. I took the paper from him and read as follows. I'm just going to read this in Watson's voice, since he's the one who's apparently reading it right now. Yeah, that's right, Pi. Thanks. You're more than welcome here. To the Red-Headed League. On account of the bequest of the late Ezekiah Hopkins of Lebanon, Pennsylvania, USA, there is now another vacancy upon which entitles a member of the League to a salary of £4 a week for purely nominal services. All red-headed men who are sound in body and mind and above the age of 21 years are eligible. Apply in person on Monday at 11 o'clock to Duncan Ross at the offices of the League, 7 Pope's Court, Fleet Street. Fleet Street, isn't that where Sweeney Todd takes place? I've only experienced Sweeney Todd once. I could be wrong, but I recognize Fleet Street. Hey, English dudes in my chat, what's up about Fleet Street? Anything cool? I like what Frost started with, like, teaching us things as we were going through the story. I wouldn't mind more about that. Fleet Street's in Westminster. Okay, that's cool. .186 Fleet Street. Oh, okay. So that is Sweeney Todd? Neat. It's actually kind of a miracle that I remembered that, if I'm being honest. Demon Barber of Fleet Street. You know, I've only seen the Johnny Depp production, but it was good. I don't remember any of the songs, though. As far as musicals go, that are kind of dark like that, I really like Les Mis.
Les Mis is very good. Look down, look down.
What on earth does this mean?
I ejaculated after I had twice read over the extraordinary announcement.
It's from another time. Okay.
Holmes chuckled and wriggled in his chair, as was his habit when in high spirits.
Oh, I'm wriggling in my chair. It's a little off the beaten track, isn't it?
Said he.
And now, Mr. Wilson, off you go at scratch and tell us all about yourself, your household, and the effect which this advertisement had upon your fortunes. You'll first make a note, Doctor, of the paper and the date. It is the Morning Chronicle of April 27, 1890. Just 2 months ago. Very good. Now, Mr. Wilson?
Well, it is just as I've been telling you, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, said Jabez Wilson, mopping his forehead. I have a small pawnbroker's business at Coburg Square near the city. It's not a very large affair, and of late years it has not done more than just give me a living. I used to be able to keep 2 assistants, but now I only keep 1, and I would have a job to pay him, but he is willing to come for half wages so as to learn the business.
What's the name of this obliging youth?
Asked Sherlock Holmes. His name is Vincent Spaulding, and he's not such a youth either. It's hard to say his age. I should not wish a smarter assistant, Mr. Holmes, and I know very well that he could better himself and earn twice what I am able to give him. But after all, if he is satisfied, why should I put ideas in his head?
Why, indeed. You seem most fortunate in having an employee who comes under the full market price. It's not a common experience among employers in this age. I don't know that your assistant is not as remarkable as your advertisement.
Oh, he has faults too, said Mr. Wilson. Never was such a fellow for photography, snapping away with a camera when he ought to be improving his mind, and then diving down into the cellar like a rabbit into its hole to develop his pictures. That is his main fault, but on the whole he's a good worker. There's no vice in him.
He's still with you, I presume?
Yes, sir. He and a girl of 14 who does a bit of simple cooking and keeps the place clean. It's all I have in the house, for I am a widower, never had any family. We live very quietly, sir, the 3 of us. We keep a roof over our heads and pay our debts if we do nothing more.
First thing that put us out was that advertisement. Spaulding, he came down into the office just this day 8 weeks. Wait a second, nope, back up. He's still going from the previous paragraph.
The first thing that put us out was this advertisement. Spaulding. He came down to the office just this day 8 weeks, with this very paper in his hand, and he says, I wish to the Lord, Mr. Wilson, that I was a red-headed man. Why that? I asks. Why, says he, here's another vacancy on the League of the Red-Headed Men. It is worth quite a little fortune to any man who gets it, and I understand that there are more vacancies than there are men, so that the trustees are at their wits' end what to do with the money. If my hair would only change color, here's a nice little crib all ready for me to step into. Why, what is it then? I asked. You see, Mr. Holmes, I'm a very stay-at-home man, and as my business came to me instead of my having to go to it, I was often weeks on end without putting my foot over the doormat. In that way, I didn't know much of what was going on outside, and I was always glad of a bit of news. Have you ever heard of the League of the Red-Headed Men? He asked with his eyes open. Never. Why, I wonder at that, for you are eligible yourself for one of the vacancies. And what are they worth? I asked. Oh, merely a couple hundred a year, but the work is slight, and it need not interfere very much with one's other occupations. Well, you can easily think that made me prick up my ears, for the business has not been over good for some years. And an extra couple of hundred would have been very handy. Tell me about it, said I. Well, said he, showing me the advertisement, you can see for yourself that the League has a vacancy. And there's the address, where you should apply for particulars. As far as I can make out, the League was founded by an American millionaire, Hezekiah Hopkins, who was very peculiar in his ways. He was himself red-headed, and a great sympathy for all red-headed men. So when he died,
it was found that he had left his enormous fortune in the hands of trustees, with instructions to apply the interest to the providing of easy berths to men whose hair is of that color. For I hear it is splendid pay and very little to do. But, said I, there would be millions of red-headed men who would apply. Not so many as you might think, he answered. You see it as really confined to Londoners and to grown men. This American had started from London when he was young, and he wanted to do the old town a good turn. Then again, I've heard it is no use your applying if your hair is light red, or dark red, or anything but real, bright, blazing, fiery red. Now, if you cared to apply, Mr. Wilson, you would just walk in, but perhaps it would hardly be worth your while to put yourself out of the way for the sake of a few £100. Now, it is a fact, gentlemen, as you may see for yourselves, that my hair is of a very full and rich tint, so that it seemed to me that if there was to be any competition in the matter, I stood as good a chance as any man that I had ever met. Vincent Spaulding seemed to know so much about it that I thought he might prove useful, so I just ordered him to put up the shutters for the day and to come right away with me. He was very willing to have a holiday, so we shut the business up and started off for the address that was given us in the advertisement. I never hope to see such a sight as that again, Mr. Holmes. From north, south, east, and west, every man who had a shade of red in his hair had tramped into the city to answer the advertisement. Fleet Street was choked with red-headed folk.
Ah, that was a fun rhyme.
And Pope's Court looked like a coster's orange barrow. I should not have thought there were so many in the whole country as there were brought together by that single advertisement. Every shade of colour they were, straw, lemon, orange, brick, Irish, setter, liver, clay. But as Spaulding said, there were not many who had the real vivid flame-coloured tint. When I saw how many were waiting, I would have given it up in despair. But Spaulding would not hear of it. How he did it I could not imagine, but he pushed and pulled and butted until he got me through the crowd and right up the steps which led to the office. There was a double stream upon the stair, some going up in hope, and some coming back dejected. But we wedged in as well as we could, and soon found ourselves in the office.
Your experience has been a most entertaining one, remarked Holmes as his client paused and refreshed his memory with a huge pinch of snuff. Pray continue your very interesting statement.
There was nothing in the office but a couple of wooden chairs and a deal table, behind which sat a small man with a head that was even redder than mine. He said a few words to each candidate as he came up, and then he always managed to find some fault in them, which would disqualify them. Getting a vacancy did not seem to be such a very easy matter after all. However, when our turn came, the little man was much more favorable to me than to any of the others, and he closed the door as we entered, so that he might have a private word with us. "This is Mr. Jabez Wilson," said my assistant, "and he is willing to fill a vacancy in the League." "And he is admirably suited for it," the other answered.
Okay, this is getting a little ridiculous. 60K viewers. Did I? I must have missed that. Anyway, I was just about to look over to, oh my god, what? Hello? Pardon my shock. I'm apparently being hosted with 59,391 viewers. Thanks to someone named Asmongold. Hello! Those of you who came from there, oh my god, that's a lot of people. Okay then. Well, I'm doing something right. Let's not let it get to our head. Let's just, if you guys came here for the story, let's just get back to the story. We're right in the middle of the Red-Headed League, which is in the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. We just started it maybe like a little over half an hour ago. And this is the curious tale of Mr. Jabez Wilson, who seem to have applied to this red-headed league. Oh, by the way, I've never read Sherlock Holmes before, so I'm doing all of this blind. I have no idea what's going to happen. It's fun. This is good so far. Giving everyone a voice. Mr. Jabez Wilson is wearing on me because he is now voicing himself and recounting he's recounting a scene in the recent past where there are multiple voice characters. So I'm having to voice him voicing other people, and that's... oh, geez. That's rough. But let's keep going and see what happens. I'm losing my light, though.
This is Mr. Jabez Wilson, said my assistant, and he is willing to fill a vacancy in the League. And he is admirably suited for it, the other answered. He has every requirement. I cannot recall when I have seen anything so fine. He took a step backward, cocked his head on one side, and gazed at my hair until I felt quite bashful. Then suddenly he plunged he plunged forward, wrung my hand, and congratulated me warmly on my success. It would be injustice to hesitate, said he. You will, however, I am sure, excuse me for taking an obvious precaution. With that, he seized my hair in both his hands and tugged until I yelled with the pain.
I wasn't expecting comedy in this. That's great.
There's water in your eyes, said he as he released me. I perceive that all is as it should be, but we have to be careful, for we have twice been deceived by wigs and once by paint.
Paint? Someone painted their head?
I could tell you tales of cobbler's wax which would disgust you with human nature. He stepped over to the window and shouted through it at the top of his voice that the vacancy was filled. A groan of disappointment came up from below, and the folks all trooped away in different directions, until there was not a red head to be seen except my own and that of the manager. My name, said he, is Mr. Duncan Ross, and I am myself one of the pensioners upon the fund left by our noble benefactor. Are you a married man, Mr. Wilson? Have you a family? I answered that I had not. His face fell immediately. Dear me, he said gravely, this is very serious indeed. I am sorry to hear you say that. The fund was, of course, for the propagation and spread of the redheads as well as for their maintenance. It is exceedingly unfortunate that you should be a bachelor.
This guy wants to breed red-headed people? What? Alright, this is getting weird with this red-headed league stuff. Unless I'm getting the wrong take on this. Anyway.
My face lengthened at this, Mr. Holmes, for I thought that I was not to have the vacancy after all. But after thinking it over for a few minutes, he said that it would be all right. In the case of another, said he, the objection might be fatal, but we must stretch a point in favor of a man with such a head of hair as yours. When shall you be able to enter upon your new duties? Well, it is a little awkward, for I have a business already, said I. Oh, never mind about that, Mr. Wilson, said Vincent Spaulding. I should be able to look after that for you. What would be the hours? I asked. 10 to 2. Now, a pawnbroker's business is mostly done of an evening, Mr. Holmes, especially Thursday and Friday evening, which is just before payday, so it would suit me very well to earn a little in the mornings. Besides, I knew that my assistant was a good man, and that he would see to anything that turned up. That would suit me very well, said I. And the pay? Is £4 a week. And the work is purely nominal. What do you call purely nominal? Well, you have to be in the office, or at least in the building, the whole time. If you leave, you forfeit your whole position forever.
Jeez, that's harsh.
The will is very clear upon that point. You don't comply with the conditions if you budge from the office during that time. It's only 4 hours a day, and I should not think of leaving, said I. No excuse will avail, said Mr. Duncan Ross. Neither sickness nor business nor anything else. There you must stay, or you lose your billet.
Is it billet or billet? Because I don't know. Maybe we really should start like a vocabulary corner as we're doing these books. There's been maybe 3 or 4 words so far that I just haven't recognized. I don't know what a billet is, or a billet. B-I-L-L-E-T. Someone look that up for me, please. Put it in the chat. I take it to mean like your opportunity for work, like your contract or something. Your bill of pay, that kind of thing, maybe.
And the work is to copy out the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Wow.
There's the first volume of it in that press. You must find your own ink, pens, and blotting paper, but we provide this table and chair.
Oh, how generous. How generous of them. A table and chair. Ooh.
Will you be ready tomorrow? Certainly, I answered. Then goodbye, Mr. Jabez Wilson, and let me congratulate you once more on the important position which you have been fortunate enough to gain. He bowed me out of the room, and I went home with my assistant, hardly knowing what to say or do. I was so pleased at my own good fortune. Well, I thought over the matter all day, and by evening I was in low spirits again, for I had quite persuaded myself that the whole affair must be some great hoax or fraud, though what its object might be I could not imagine. It seemed altogether past belief that anyone could make such a will, or that they would pay such a sum for doing anything so simple as copying out the Encyclopedia Britannica. Vincent Spaulding did what he could to cheer me up, but by bedtime I had reasoned myself out of the whole thing. However, in the morning, I determined to have a look at it anyhow, so I bought a penny bottle of ink, and with a quill pen and 7 sheets of foolscap paper, I started off for Pope's Court. Well, to my surprise and delight, everything was as right as possible. The table was set out ready for me, and Mr. Duncan Ross was there to see that I got fairly to work. He started me off upon the letter A, and then he left me, but he would drop in from time to time to see that all was right with me. At 2 o'clock, he bade me good day, complimented me upon the amount that I had written, and locked the door of the office after me. This went on day after day, Mr. Holmes. And on Saturday, the manager came in and plunked down 4 golden sovereigns for my week's work. It was the same next week, and the same the week after. Every morning I was there at 10, and every afternoon I left at 2. By degrees, Mr. Duncan Ross took to coming in only once of a morning, and then, after a time, he did not come in at all. Still, of course, I never dared to leave the room for an instant, for I was not sure when he might come. And the billet was such a good one, there it is again, and suited me so well that I would not risk the loss of it.
Billet. Noun. 1. A place, usually a civilian's house or other non-military facility where soldiers are lodged temporarily. Soldiers? What does that have to do with this? Interesting. I wonder if the word's definition has evolved over time. Maybe it used to mean something different in the late 1800s. It's a bit of a cruel... If that's a prank, it's a bit of a cruel prank. Come on, man. Don't do stuff like that. If that was a prank, don't do stuff like that. Not cool. If it's not a prank, then wow, cool. Great. I'm thrilled. But you're here for the story, so we'll continue with the story.
"8 weeks passed away like this, and I had written about abbots and archery and armor and architecture and Attica, and hoped with diligence that I might get on to the bees before very long. It cost me something in foolscap, and I had pretty nearly filled a shelf with my writings. And then suddenly the whole business came to an end."
To an end.
"Yes, sir. And no later than this morning. I went to my work as usual at 10 o'clock, but the door was shut and locked, with a little square of cardboard hammered onto the middle of the panel with a tack. Here it is, and you can read for yourself."
Oh boy, narrator voice. Oh, it's been so long. That was multiple pages of Mr. Jabez Wilson.
He held up a piece of white cardboard about the size of a sheet of notepaper. It read in this fashion: "The Red-Headed League is dissolved. October 9th, 1890. Sherlock Holmes and I surveyed this curt announcement and the rueful face behind it, until the comical side of the affair so completely overtopped every other consideration, and we both burst out into a roar of laughter. "I cannot see that there is anything very funny," cried our client, flushing up to the roots of his flaming head. "If you can do nothing better than laugh at me, I can go elsewhere."
No, no, cried Holmes, shoving him back into the chair from which he had half risen. I really wouldn't miss your case for the world. It is most refreshingly unusual. But there is, if you'll excuse my saying so, something just a little funny about it. Pray, what steps did you take when you found the card upon the door? Okay, late Middle English, originally denoting a short written document. That's probably it. Billet or billet. The verb was recorded in late 16th century in the noun sense. A written order requiring a householder to lodge the bearer, usually a soldier. Ah, okay. Now it makes sense. Evelzumi, thank you very much. Appreciate that that assistance there, buddy. Words are important. You should know the meaning behind what we say.
"I was staggered, sir. I did not know what to do. Then I called at the offices round, but none of them seemed to know anything about it. Finally, I went to the landlord, who was an accountant living on the ground floor, and I asked him if he could tell me what had become of the Red-Headed League. He said that he had never heard of any such body. Then I asked him who Mr. Duncan Ross was. He answered that the name was new to him.
He got conned. That's what happened.
"Well," said I, "the gentleman at number 4. "What, the red-headed man?" "Yes." "Oh," said he, "his name was William Morris. He was a solicitor and was using my room as temporary convenience until his new premises were ready. He moved out yesterday." "Where could I find him?" "Oh, at his new offices. He did tell me the address. Yes, 17 King Edward Street near St. Paul's. I started off, Mr. Holmes, but when I got to that address, it was a manufactory of artificial kneecaps. And no one in it had ever heard of either Mr. William Morris or Mr. Duncan Ross."
This just keeps getting better. "And what'd you do then?"
asked Holmes. "I went home to Saxe-Coburg Square, and I took the advice of my assistant. But he could not help me in any way. He could only say that if I wanted, I should hear by post. But that was not quite good enough, Mr. Holmes. I did not wish to lose such a place without a struggle. So, as I had heard that you were good enough to give advice to poor folk who were in need of it, I came right away to you."
And you did very wisely, said Holmes. Your case is an exceedingly remarkable one, and I'll be happy to look into it. From what you've told me, I think it may be possible that graver issues hang from it than might at first sight appear. Grave enough, said Mr. Jabez Wilson. Why, I've lost 4 pounds a week. As far as you are personally concerned, remarked Holmes, I do not see that you have any grievance against this extraordinary league. On the contrary, you are, as I understand, richer by some 30 pound, to say nothing of the minute knowledge which you've gained on every subject which comes under the letter A. You've lost nothing by them. No, sir, but I want to find out about them, and who they are, and what their object was in playing this prank, if it was a prank, upon me. It was a pretty expensive joke for them, for it cost them 32 pounds. We shall endeavor to clear up these points for you. And first, 1 or 2 questions, Mr. Wilson. This assistant of yours who first called your attention to the advertisement, how long had he been with you? About a month then. How did he come? In answer to an advertisement. Was he the only applicant? No, I had a dozen. Why'd you pick him? Because he was handy and would come cheap. At half wages, in fact. Yes. What's he like, this Vincent Spaulding? Small, stout built, very quick in his ways. No hair on his face, though he's not short of 30. Has a white splash of acid upon his forehead. That's weird. Was that common? White splash of acid? So many fun new concepts. Holmes sat up in his chair in considerable excitement. Well, consider me considerably excited. Ah, you changed to Lumble Humberjack. Cool. Right. Yes, Holmes sat up in his chair in considerable excitement. I thought as much, said he. Have you ever observed that his ears are pierced for earrings? Yes, sir. He told me that a gypsy had done it for him when he was a lad. Huh, said Holmes, sinking back in deep thought. He's still with you? Oh, yes, sir. I've only just left him. And has your business been attended to in your absence? Nothing to complain of, sir. There's never very much to do of a morning. That'll do, Mr. Wilson. I'll be happy to give you an opinion upon the subject in the course of a day or two. Today's Saturday, and I hope that by Monday we may come to a conclusion. Well, Watson, said Holmes, when our visitor had left us. What do you make of it all? I make nothing of it, I answered frankly. It is a most mysterious business. As a rule, said Holmes, the more bizarre a thing is, the less mysterious it proves to be. It's your commonplace, featureless crimes which are really puzzling, just as a commonplace face is the most difficult to identify. But I must be prompt over this matter. What are you going to do then? I asked. To smoke. Texan Holmes is the best. What are you going to do then? To smoke. He answered. It's quite a 3-pipe problem, and I beg that you won't speak to me for 50 minutes. He curled himself up in his chair, with his thin knees drawn up to his hawk-like nose, and there he sat with his eyes closed and his black clay pipe thrusting out like the bill of some strange bird. I had come to the conclusion that he had dropped asleep, and indeed was nodding myself, when he suddenly sprang out of his chair, with the gesture of a man who has made up his mind, and put his pipe down upon the mantelpiece. Sarasate plays at the St. James Hall this afternoon, he remarked. What do you think, Watson? Could your patient spare you for a few hours?
I have nothing to do today. My practice is never very absorbing.
Then put on your hat and come. I'm going through the city first. We can have some lunch on the way. I observe that there's a good deal of German music on the program, which is rather more to my taste than Italian or French. It's introspective, and I want to introspect. Come along. How much longer is this? Okay. We've got like 10 pages left to go. That's good. I'm going to turn on more light, though. Oof. I'd like if I could have some kind of a mid-level between that, my room light, versus the low light that we just had. That's a little too harsh for this. I want this to be cozy, you know? Cozy. Get a personal reading light? Yeah, so here's the thing. I do have a personal reading light, but it's bolted to the shelf above my bed, which is right over there. Usually, when I'm reading for my own pleasure, I'm lying in bed with my book reading lamp on. In fact, my great-grandmother left me my book reading lamp. That's my token of her. It means a lot to me. I can't use it if I'm all the way over here, so it's unfortunate. But I could get another one that I attach to my book. Oh. Yeah, I'll think about that. Next time I get a donation, I'll look into a book reading lamp. Bought a Kindle Oasis 2, 32 gig, can read at night everywhere, so chill, bigger pages, and it's light. Nice! That's awesome. On a daily basis. Cute name, I like that. Yeah, I can't get into e-readers. Like, I've tried. No. For me, it's physical book or audiobook. It's one or the other. I can't do a digital thing. Just don't like it, personally, but you do you. Honestly, that would make this a lot easier, but unfortunately, it's just not my preference. Read a lot in the winter. That's a good way to spend the winter. When you got, like, crisp winter air, sitting out in the cold, reading, it's really nice. I'm very much looking forward to later autumn and winter. What was that? Oh. Stuff just falling. Don't worry about it. You know what, actually, I don't need these to read. I was only doing it for dramatic effect, so I'm just gonna take them off. Because it's kinda straining my eyes. I need them to see far away, not up close. So, hello, this is my natural look. Oh yeah, your name is Frost. Actually is, too. It's really cool. Right. So they are going to listen to some German music at St. James Hall. Traveling through the city and getting some lunch. We traveled by the underground as far as Aldersgate, and a short walk took us to Saxe-Coburg Square, the scene of the singular story which we had listened to in the morning. It was a poky little shabby genteel place, where 4 lines of dingy 2-storied brick houses looked out into a small railed-in enclosure, where a lawn of weedy grass and a few clumps of faded laurel bushes made a hard fight against a smoke-laden and uncongenial atmosphere. 3 gilt balls and a brown board with Jabez Wilson in white letters upon a corner house announced the place where our red-headed client carried on his business.
Sherlock Holmes stopped in front of it with his head on one side and looked it all over with his eyes shining brightly between puckered lids. Then he walked slowly up the street and then down again to the corner, still looking keenly at the houses. Finally, he returned to the pawnbroker's, and, having thumped vigorously upon the pavement with his stick 2 or 3 times, he went up to the door and knocked. It was instantly opened by a bright-looking, clean-shaven young fellow, who asked him to step in. "Thank you," said Holmes. "I only wish to ask you how you'd go from here to the Strand."
I need a voice for this character. Bright-looking, clean-shaven young fellow. So maybe like an eager-sounding voice. Hold on. Yeah, my candle isn't behaving. I need a new candle. My problem is the wick burnt out before the candle did. I'm not really sure how to fix this. This is from my grandfather, by the way. He's gone now, too. I like to keep mementos from all the people I care about. But I'm glad that we're of a like mind about the candle thing. Yeah, I moved that there specifically for this stream. Atmosphere, you know. Apparently it mattered to at least one person. Third right, fourth left. That's a terrible voice.
Answered the assistant promptly, closing the door.
Oh, good.
"Smart fella, that," observed Holmes as we walked away. "He is, in my judgment, the 4th smartest man in London, and for daring I am not sure that he's not a claim to be the 3rd. I've known something of him before." "Evidently," said I, "Mr. Wilson's assistant counts for a good deal in this mystery of the Red-Headed League. I am sure that you inquired your way merely in order that you might see him." "Not him."
What then?
"The knees of his trousers."
And what did you see?
"What I expected to see."
Why did you beat the pavement?
"My dear doctor, this is a time for observation, not for talk. We're spies in an enemy country. We know something of Saxe-Coburg Square. Let us now explore the parts which lie behind it. The road in which we found ourselves as we turned round the corner from the retired Saxe-Coburg Square presented as great a contrast to it as the front of a picture does to the back. It was one of the main arteries which conveyed the traffic of the city to the north and west. The roadway, which was blocked with the immense stream of commerce, flowed in a double tide inward and outward, while the footpaths were black with the hurrying swarm of pedestrians. It was difficult to realize, as we looked at the line of fine shops and stately business premises, that they really abutted on the other side upon the faded and stagnant square which we had just quitted. "Let me see," said Holmes, standing at the corner and glancing along the line. "I should like just to remember the order of the houses here. It's a hobby of mine to have an exact knowledge of London. There's Mortimer's, the tobacconist, the little newspaper shop, the Coburg branch of the City and Suburban Bank, the vegetarian restaurant, and McFarland's carriage building depot. That carries us right onto the other block. Now, Doctor, we've done our work, so it's time we had some play. Sandwich and a cup of coffee, then off to violin land where all is sweetness and delicacy and harmony, and there are no red-headed clients to vex us with their conundrums." My friend was an enthusiastic musician, being himself not only a very capable performer, but a composer of no ordinary merit. All the afternoon he sat in the stalls, wrapped in the most perfect happiness, gently waving his long, thin fingers in time to the music, while his gently smiling face and his languid, dreamy eyes were as unlike those of Holmes, the sleuth hound, Holmes the relentless, keen-witted, ready-handed criminal agent, as was possible to conceive. In his singular character, the dual nature alternately asserted itself, and his extreme exactness and astuteness represented, as I have often thought, the reaction against the poetic and contemplative mood which occasionally predominated in him. The swing of his nature took him from extreme languor to devouring energy, and as I knew well, he was never so truly formidable as when, for days on end, he had been lounging in his armchair amid his improvisations and his black-letter editions. Then it was that the lust of the chase would suddenly come upon him, and that his brilliant reasoning power would rise to the level of intuition, until those who were unacquainted with his methods would look askance at him as on a man whose knowledge was not that of other mortals. When I saw him that afternoon so enwrapped in the music at St. James' Hall, I felt that an evil time might be coming upon those he had set himself to hunt down.
Wow, that was a powerful paragraph. That was some ominous reading there from Watson. Jeez. An evil time might be coming upon those whom he had set himself to hunt down. Wow, scary. Don't mess with Sherlock Holmes.
"You want to go home, Doctor, no doubt," he remarked as we emerged.
Yes, it would be well.
"And I have some business to do which will take some hours. This business at Coburg Square is serious.
Why serious?
Considerable crime is in contemplation. I have every reason to believe that we shall be in time to stop it. But today being Saturday rather complicates matters. I'm going to want your help tonight."
At what time?
10 will be early enough.
I shall be at Baker Street at 10.
Very well. And I say, Doctor, there may be some little danger, so kindly put your army revolver in your pocket. He waved his hand, turned on his heel, and disappeared in an instant among the crowd. I trust that I am not more dense than my neighbors, but I was always oppressed with a sense of my own stupidity in my dealings with Sherlock Holmes. Here I had heard what he had heard, I had seen what he had seen, and yet, from his words, it was evident that he saw clearly not only what had happened, but what was about to happen, while to me the whole business was still confused and grotesque. As I drove home to my house in Kensington, I thought over it all, from the extraordinary story of the red-headed copier of the encyclopedia, down to the visit to Saxe-Coburg Square, and the ominous words with which he had parted from me. What was this nocturnal expedition? And why should I go armed? Where were we going? And what were we to do? I had the hint from Holmes that this smooth-faced pawnbroker's assistant was a formidable man, a man who might play a deep game. I tried to puzzle it out, but gave it up in despair, and set the matter aside until night should bring an explanation.
For those who don't know, Dr. John Watson was an army doctor, part of the 5th Northumberland Fusiliers. Ooh, that's a fun mouth sound. Northumberland Fusiliers. I like that.
It was 9:15 when I started from home and made my way across the park, and so through Oxford Street to Baker Street. 2 hansoms were standing at the door, and as I entered the passage, I heard the sound of voices from above. On entering his room, I found Holmes in animated conversation with 2 men, one of whom I recognized as Peter Jones, the official police agent, while the other was a long, thin, sad-faced man with a very shiny hat and oppressively respectable frock coat. "Ha! Our party's complete," said Holmes, buttoning up his pea jacket and taking his heavy hunting crop from the rack. "Watson, I think you know Mr. Jones of Scotland Yard. Let me introduce you to Mr. Merryweather, who's to be our companion in tonight's adventure."
I gotta have a name for this Mr. Jones of Scotland Yard. So he's a police officer.
"We're hunting in couples again, Doctor, you see,"
Yeah, that's good.
said Jones in his consequential way. "Our friend here is a wonderful man for starting a chase. All he wants is an old dog to help him do the running down."
I hope a wild goose may not prove to be the end of our chase,
observed Mr. Merryweather gloomily.
I like that Mr. Merryweather, like that's a happy name, but like he's the dour one, it seems. It's a nice contrast. A juxtaposition. Ooh, what did I just do for Mr. Jones?
"You may place considerable confidence in Mr. Holmes, sir," said the police agent loftily. "He has his own little methods, which are, if he won't mind my saying so, just a little too theoretical and fantastic. But he has the makings of a detective in him. It is not too much to say that once or twice, as in that business of the Sholto murder and the Agra treasure, he has been more nearly correct than the official force."
Oh, if you say so, Mr. Jones, it is all right,
said the stranger with deference.
Still, I confess that I miss my rubber. It is the first Saturday night for 27 years that I have not had my rubber.
"I think you'll find," said Sherlock Holmes,
"that you will play a part for a higher stake tonight than you have ever done yet, and that the play will be more exciting. For you, Mr. Merryweather, the stake will be some £30,000. And for you, Jones, he'll be the man upon whom you wish to lay your hands."
"John Clay, the murderer, thief, smasher, and forger. He's a young man, Mr. Merryweather, but he's at the head of his profession, and I would rather have my bracelets on him than on any criminal in London. He's a remarkable man, is young John Clay."
Aw, Lyra! Thank you! Pleasure! Thank you so much. What a joy. Alright, I stated that on my next donation I'd look into getting a book reading light. So I'll do that. Thank you, Lyra. Cheers to you. I'm glad you're enjoying this. It means a lot to me. Right.
"John Clay, the murderer, thief, smasher, and forger. He's a young man, Mr. Merryweather, but he's at the head of his profession, and I would rather have my bracelets on him than on any criminal in London. He's a remarkable man, is young John Clay. His grandfather was a royal duke, and he himself has been to Eton and Oxford. His brain is as cunning as his fingers, and though we meet signs of him at every turn, we never know where to find the man himself. He'll crack a crib in Scotland one week and be raising money to build an orphanage in Cornwall the next. I've been on his track for years, and I've never set eyes on him yet."
I hope that I may have the pleasure of introducing you tonight. I've had one or two little turns with Mr. John Clay, and I agree with you that he is at the head of his profession. It is past 10, however, and quite time that we started. If you two will take the first hansom, Watson and I will follow in the second. Sherlock Holmes was not very communicative during the long drive, and lay back in the cab, humming the tunes which he had heard in the afternoon. We rattled through an endless labyrinth of gaslit streets, until we emerged into Farrington Street. "We're close there now," my friend remarked. "This fellow Merriweather is a bank director, and personally interested in the matter. I thought it as well to have Jones with us also. He's not a bad fellow, though an absolute imbecile in his profession. He has one positive virtue. He is as brave as a bulldog and as tenacious as a lobster if he gets his claws upon anyone. Here we are, and they're waiting for us." We had reached the same crowded thoroughfare. Oh. I'm trying to resist a sneeze. Okay. We had reached the same crowded thoroughfare in which we had found ourselves in the morning. Our cabs were dismissed, and following the guidance of Mr. Merriweather, we passed down a narrow passage and through a side door which he opened for us. Within there was a small corridor which ended in a very massive iron gate. This also was opened, and led down a flight of winding stone steps, which terminated at another formidable gate. Mr. Merriweather stopped to light a lantern, and then conducted us down a dark, earth-smelling passage, and so, after opening a third door, into a huge vault or cellar, which was piled all round with crates and massive boxes. "You're not very vulnerable from above," Holmes remarked as he held up the lantern and gazed about him. "Nor from below," said Mr. Merriweather, striking his stick upon the flags which lined the floor. "Why, dear me, it sounds quite hollow," he remarked, looking up in surprise. "I must really ask you to be a little more quiet," said Holmes severely. "You've already imperiled the whole success of our expedition. Might I beg that you'd have the goodness to sit down upon one of those boxes and not interfere?" The solemn Mr. Merriweather perched himself upon a crate with a very injured expression upon his face, while Holmes fell upon his knees upon the floor, and with the lantern and a magnifying lens began to examine minutely the cracks between the stones. A few seconds sufficed to satisfy him, for he sprang to his feet again and put his glass in his pocket. "We have at least an hour before us," he remarked, "for they can hardly take any steps until the good pawnbroker's safely in bed. Then they'll not lose a minute, for the sooner they do their work, the longer time they'll have for their escape. We are at present, Doctor, as no doubt you have divined, in the cellar of the city branch of one of the principal London banks. Mr. Merriweather's the chairman of directors, and he will explain to you that there are reasons why the more daring criminals of London should take a considerable interest in this cellar at present." Tenacious as a lobster. Yeah, that's a good one, huh? I like that. Brave as a bulldog, tenacious as a lobster. "It is our French gold," whispered the director. Oh, whispered. "It is our French gold," whispered the director. "We have had several warnings that an attempt might be made upon it." "Your French gold?" "Yes. We had occasion some months ago to strengthen our resources, and borrowed for that purpose 30,000 Napoleons from the Bank of France. It's become known that we've never had occasion to unpack the money, and that it is still lying in our cellar. The crate upon which I sit contains 2,000 Napoleons packed between layers of lead foil. Our reserve of bullion is much larger at present than is usually kept in a single branch office, and the directors have had misgivings upon the subject." "Which were very well justified," observed Holmes. "And now it is time that we arranged our little plans. I expect that within an hour matters will come to a head. In the meantime, Mr. Merriweather, we must put the screen over that dark lantern."
And sit in the dark?
I'm afraid so. I'd brought a pack of cards in my pocket, but I thought that as we were, this is French, partier carré, Sherlock Holmes, I'm sure, Latin, French, German, I'm having to do other, like, language words with a Texan accent for an Englishman, and my brain is doing flips. You might have had your rubber after all, but I see that the enemy's preparations have gone so far that we cannot risk the presence of a light. And first of all, we must choose our positions. These are daring men, and though we shall take them at a disadvantage, they may do us some harm unless we're careful. I'll stand behind this crate, and you conceal yourselves behind those. When I flash a light on them, close in swiftly. If they fire, Watson, have no compunction about shooting them down. He really is a Texan. No, that's an unfair statement. That's a generalization. I retract. I placed my revolver, cocked, upon the top of the wooden case behind which I crouched. Holmes shot the slide across the front of his lantern and left us in pitch darkness. Such an absolute darkness as I have never before experienced. The smell of hot metal remained to assure us that the light was still there, ready to flash out at a moment's notice. To me, with my nerves worked up to a pitch of expectancy, there was something depressing and subduing in the sudden gloom and in the cold, dank air of the vault. "They have but one retreat," whispered Holmes, "and that's back through the house into Saxe-Coburg Square. I hope that you've done what I asked you, Jones." I have an inspector and 2 officers waiting at the front door, and we've stopped all the holes, and now we must be silent and wait. What a time it seemed! From comparing notes afterward, it was but an hour and a quarter. Yet it appeared to me that the night must have almost gone, and the dawn be breaking above us. My limbs were weary and stiff, for I feared to change my position, yet my nerves were worked up to the highest pitch of tension, and my hearing was so acute that I could not only hear the gentle breathing of my companions, but I could distinguish the deeper, heavier in-breath of the bulky Jones from the thin, sighing note of the bank director. From my position, I could look over the case in the direction of the floor. Suddenly, my eyes caught the glint of a light. At first it was but a lurid spark upon the stone pavement, then it lengthened out until it became a yellow line, and then, without any warning or sound, a gash seemed to open, and a hand appeared, a white, almost womanly hand, which felt about in the center of the little area of light. For a minute or more, the hand with its writhing fingers protruded out of the floor. Then it was withdrawn, as suddenly as it appeared, and all was dark again, save the single lurid spark which marked a chink between the stones. Its disappearance, however, was but momentary. With a rending, tearing sound, one of the broad white stones turned over upon its side and left a square, gaping hole, through which streamed the light of a lantern. Over the edge there peeped a clean-cut, boyish face, which looked keenly about it, and then, with a hand on either side of the aperture, drew itself shoulder-high and waist-high until one knee rested upon the edge. In another instant he stood at the side of the hole, and was hauling after him a companion, lithe and small like himself, with a pale face and a shock of very red hair. "It's all clear," he whispered. "Have you the chisel and the bags? Great Scott! Jump, Archie, jump, and I'll swing for it." Sherlock Holmes had sprung out and seized the intruder by the collar. The other dived down the hole, and I heard the sound of rending cloth as Jones clutched at his skirts. The light flashed upon the barrel of a revolver, but Holmes's hunting crop came down on the man's wrist, and the pistol clinked upon the stone floor.
It's of no use, John Clay, said Holmes blandly. You've no chance at all.
So I see, the other answered with the utmost coolness. I fancy that my pal's all right, though I see you've got his coattails.
Now, there's 3 men waiting for him at the door, said Holmes.
Oh, indeed. You seem to have done the thing very completely. I must compliment you.
And I you, Holmes answered. Your red-headed idea was very new and effective.
Oh my gosh, again? Lyra? Aw. Tenacious like a lobster. Yeah, that's a fun one, huh? You know, we should set up a bot and make that a command or something. Like, exclamation lobster. And just puts out, like, quotes from Sherlock Holmes or something. That could be fun. Kim, you gotta talk to me about setting up bots. I don't know if you're still here, but you're the only person I know in this chat who's had experience with that. Thank you, Lyra. Cheers.
You'll see your pal again presently, said Jones. He's quicker at climbing down holes than I am. Just hold out while I fix the derbies.
I beg that you'll not touch me with your filthy hands,
remarked our prisoner as the handcuffs clattered upon his wrists.
There's like 6 voices in this scene. It's driving me nuts. Oh, Pi helped you? Awesome. Frost, you can pull quotes? Please. Please. Please help with that, since you're the one who knows Sherlock very much. Thanks.
You may not be aware that I have royal blood in my veins.
Really?
Have the goodness also, when you address me, always so say sir and please.
All right, said Jones with a stare and a snigger.
You don't see that word very often these days.
Well, would you please, sir, march upstairs where we can get a cab to carry your highness to the police station?
Yeah, you tell him, Jones.
That is better. That is better,
said John Clay serenely. He made a sweeping bow to the 3 of us and walked quietly off in the custody of the detective. Really, Mr. Holmes, said Mr. Merriweather as we followed them from the cellar, I do not know how the bank can thank you or repay you. There is no doubt that you have detected and defeated in the most complete manner one of the most determined attempts at bank robbery that have ever come within my experience. I've had 1 or 2 little scores of my own to settle with Mr. John Clay, said Holmes. I've been at some small expense over this matter, which I'll expect the bank to refund. But beyond that, I'm amply repaid by having had an experience which is in many ways unique, and by hearing the very remarkable narrative of the Red-Headed League.
There's like a next scene kind of thing.
You see, Watson, he explained in the early hours of the morning as we sat over a glass of whiskey and soda in Baker Street.
Is that a thing? Whiskey and soda? I'm not a drinking guy, so I don't know. Whiskey and soda.
It was perfectly obvious from the first that the only possible object of this rather fantastic business of the advertisement of the League and the copying of the encyclopedia must be to get
Okay, hold on.
must be to get this not overbright pawnbroker out of the way for a number of hours every day. It was a curious way of managing it, but really it'd be difficult to suggest a better. The method was no doubt suggested to Clay's ingenious mind by the color of the accomplice's hair. £4 a week was a lure which must draw him, and
What was it to them who were playing for thousands? They put in the advertisement, one rogue has the temporary office, the other rogue incites the man to apply for it, and together, they managed to secure his absence every morning in the week. From the time that I heard the assistant hadn't come for half wages, it was obvious to me that he had some strong motive for securing the situation.
But how could you guess what the motive was?
Had there been women in the house, I should have suspected a mere vulgar intrigue. That, however, is out of the question. The man's business was a small one, and there was nothing in his house which would account for such elaborate preparations and such an expenditure as they were at. It must then be something out of the house. What could it be? I thought of the assistant's fondness for photography and his trick of vanishing into the cellar. The cellar! There was the end of this tangled clue. Then I made inquiries as to this mysterious assistant and found that I had to deal with one of the coolest and most daring criminals in London. John Clay, the coolest and most daring criminal in London. He's the coolest. He was doing something in the cellar, something which took many hours a day for months on end. What could it be, once more? I could think of nothing save that he was running a tunnel to some other building. So far, I had got when he went to visit the scene of action. I surprised you by beating upon the pavement with my stick. I was ascertaining whether the cellar stretched out in front or behind. It was not in front. Then I rang the bell, and as I hoped, the assistant answered it. We've had some skirmishes, but we'd never sat eyes on each other before. I hardly looked at his face. His knees were what I wished to see. You must yourself have remarked how worn, wrinkled, and stained they were. They spoke of those hours of burrowing. The only remaining point was what they were burrowing for. I walked round the corner, saw the city and the suburban bank abutted on our friend's premises, and felt that I had solved my problem. When you drove home after the concert, I called up Scotland Yard and pawned the chairman of the bank directors, with the result that you've seen.
And how could you tell that they would make their attempt tonight?
I asked. Well, when they closed their league offices, that was a sign that they cared no longer about Mr. Jabez Wilson's presence. In other words, that they had completed their tunnel. But it was essential that they should use it soon, as it might be discovered, or the bullion might be removed. Saturday would suit them better than any other day, as it would give them 2 days for their escape. For all these reasons, I expected them to come tonight.
You've reasoned it out beautifully,
I exclaimed in unfeigned admiration.
It is so long a chain, and yet every link rings true.
It saved me from ennui.
This Texan accent is everything. I love this.
It saved me from ennui, he answered, yawning. Alas, I already feel it closing in on me. My life is spent in one long effort to escape from the commonplaces of existence. These little problems help me to do so.
And you are a benefactor of the race,
said I. He shrugged his shoulders. Well, perhaps after all it is some little use, he remarked.
Oh God, here's French again.
L'homme c'est rien, Louvre c'est tout. As Gustave Flaubert wrote to George Sand.
That's like the stinger at the end. I have no idea what that means. It's a reference to another letter or piece of literature or maybe something political, and I don't know it. It's supposed to tie everything together because it's the stinger at the end, and I'm at a loss. Oh gosh. That's it. That's the end of the Red-Headed League. Beans. Well, I really liked that first bit of Holmes's like ending soliloquy there.
It saved me from ennui. Ah, boy. That's good stuff. I think that's going to be good for me streaming tonight. Thank you once again, all of you who were able to join me tonight. This has been Mars on Monday. I'm looking at trying to become affiliate, so I'm hoping to be streaming more often. There might be Mars on other days, but I'll work that out. In the meantime, this was The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. We did 2 stories. It was a lot of fun. I look forward to next time. We've got a lot more book to go, so we're not even like halfway through this. And then I've got other works too. I've got Villette by Charlotte Bront, and I've got Alice in Wonderland, for that matter too. So that should be fun. And my grandmother's own book. That's a special treat for much later. Or whenever. Whatever I fancy, I guess. Anyway, have a good night, everyone. Cheers to all of you. Those of you who followed me, thank you for following me. Those of you who are considering it, please do. I'm trying to make affiliate. Those of you who donated, thank you very much. It means a lot. I'll try to have an even better setup next time. I think I learned some lessons from this tonight. All right. You folks have a good night.
You saved me from the ennui.
Thank you kindly, Sherlock Holmes.